Chapter 10:14. The battle on the battlefield was still ongoing. The team that had retreated to a distance of 10 miles finally stopped, turning around to look at the terrifying battlefield in the distance. Over there, wave after wave of violent magical energy continuously shook the void. These were the purest and most condensed spells. From time to time, one or two thick energy beams would sweep across the sky, shattering the clouds and revealing the strange, bewitching, dark red sky. Sensing the intensity of the energy shock waves in the distance, Jamu and the other magi could not help but reveal expressions of shock and disbelief. That legendary fire wizard was actually able to fight evenly with Lord Daiklon with just a grade 4 magical equipment. How could they not be shocked and aghast? After all, a magical machine was still a magical machine. Although its massive body gave it unparalleled strength, it could not change its innate disadvantage of slow and clumsy movements. As long as the team used a few tricks, they would be able to avoid the enemy's attack range and slowly whittle down the enemy's defenses. Putting themselves in Dickland's shoes, the Tier 3 Magi did not think that the Tier 4 magical machine would be difficult to deal with. However, judging from the battle in the distance, Lord Dickland did not seem to have the upper hand in this battle. This was why the team could not help but be shocked by the strength of the Tier 3 Fire Wizard. Of course, if the Fabris family had investigated a little deeper and found out about the Tier 4 Golem Dragon's battle record, they would not have been so surprised. After all, in the Lance Plain, the Golem Dragon had personally fought against a Tier 4 Giant Dragon. Jamu, Lord Dickland should be able to win, right? Magus asked worriedly. There is no doubt about this. Lord Dickland will definitely win. Jamu's face revealed a resolute expression. Hearing this, the team immediately calmed down. Truthfully speaking, at this point in the war, even with the Fabris family's powerful foundation, they were starting to lose control of the battlefield. Before the emergence of the Tier 4 sorcerers, this war was still within the scope of a regular sorcerer war. Victory and defeat were common occurrences. However, now that the war had reached the Tier 4 level, the entire situation was out of control. If Dickland could not suppress the combination of the Tier 4 Golem Dragon and the Tier 3 Legendary Fire Wizard, all of the Fabris family's previous efforts would be for naught. So what if they had seized so many territories and resource points? So what if they had many times the number of low-ranked magi? As long as they could not take down the Tier 4 Golem Dragon and the Tier 3 Fire Wizard, everything else was for naught. What truly measured the strength of two Magus families was not these miscellaneous numbers, but the individual strength of the Magi at the peak of their families. When a Tier 4 Magus wanted to establish his own family or country, many factions and human kingdoms would fight to join him or her. In fact, he didn't even need to worry about any chores at all. Thus, the matter of changing the world could be easily accomplished. In the Magus Magi, the Magus family would be the Magus. To be able to obstruct or interfere with the will of a rank 4 Magus, it could only be another rank 4 Magus, or someone with the same strength as the rank 4 Magus. When the war spread to the battle, the Magoth, the Magers, the Magus of two, the Maging, the Magoth, the Magid. When the war reached the origin of the Magus family, it was the moment when the strongest forces of the two families clashed. Without Grimm, the Magus Golem Dragon would not be complete. It might be able to withstand the ferocious attacks of a Tier 4 dragon, and it might be invincible in the family battlefield. However, it would be difficult for it to withstand the attacks of a powerful Tier 4 physique refinement sorcerer, allowing the flames of battle to spread to the interior of its thick metal shell. However, Grimm's appearance had made up for its only shortcoming. With Grimm's giant magic cannons and energy beams, as well as Grimm's powerful fire spells and holy light that could ignore defense, the Magus Dickland's combat strength was greatly restricted. He could no longer choose the battlefield as he pleased. Moreover, the Magus Golem Dragon was tough enough to fight. This toughness was not only reflected in the hardness of the superalloy itself, but also in the interaction and fusion of the magic energy within it. Without the ubiquitous magic energy, the hardness of the superalloy would not be able to defend against the violent attacks of a Magus Magus. Due to the fact that the magical energy had permeated every inch of the puppet dragon's body, most of the energy of Declan's violent attack was nullified by the magical energy contained in the puppet dragon's body. Only the remaining energy could be used on the Magus Golem dragon's metal shell, leaving deep and shallow marks on it. Otherwise, even if the Magus Golem dragon's metal shell was 10 times thicker, it would not be able to stop Declan's bare fists from tearing it into pieces. After the attack was thwarted, Declan's defense started to show some problems. Although they were both Magus Magus dragons, Declan's body was much smaller than the Magus Golem dragon. Hence, there was a huge difference in their combat strength. However, with the Magus Golem dragon's clumsy body and pathetic speed, it would require Declan's full cooperation if it wanted to hit him with its metal legs or ferocious dragon head. Fortunately, Grimm was able to make up for the Golem dragon's shortcomings with the help of the giant magic cannons. He was able to send the Golem dragon fleeing in all directions with thick beams of energy, unable to break through the Golem dragon's defenses. After a few attempts, Grimm stopped using fire spells. Instead, he converted all the fire energy into holy light energy through Sodden's divine ring. Using the speed and penetrative ability of pure light energy, he began to trample on the Magus Golem. Light was unstoppable. It could penetrate a Magus Magus Magus's defensive force field and inflict a strange burn effect on the Magus Golem's body. This kind of attack was unheard of. Therefore, Declan, who had always liked to fight head-on, felt uncomfortable. Since he could not penetrate the Magus Golem dragon's body, nor could he break its legs, Declan gave up on such an extreme waste of energy and focused on killing the Magus Golem. In the entire segment, the Magus Golem was undoubtedly the weakest. He was the only weakness that Declan could exploit. He did not believe that a rank 3 fire wizard would be able to withstand the close combat attacks of a rank 4 anatomy refinement sorcerer, even with the protection of the Magus puppet dragon. Of course, this change in target also caused Declan to face a pincer attack from the 3 energy beams. However, with his defensive force field, being hit by one of the energy beams would only cause the force field to tremble violently. Only by being hit by 2 energy beams at the same time would the force field shatter. Declan, who had lost his defensive force field, only needed to dodge the incoming attacks and readjust the energy flow in his body. Then, he would be able to create a new defensive force field and attack without restraint. Of course, throughout the entire process, Declan had to endure the continuous bombardment of over 100 magic cannons, as well as the strange light energy attacks of the Fire Magus. Hence, from the start of the battle until now, the Magus Golem dragon was covered in fist marks, while Declan had 3 to 5 visible wounds on his body. The most serious one was below his right rib. It was a terrifying wound left behind by the 3rd energy beam that brushed past his body after his defensive force field was pierced by 2 energy beams. That attack had caused a bowl-sized chunk of flesh to disappear from Declan's right rib. The exposed wound was completely crystallized, and one could vaguely see strands of magical energy lingering on it. Declan lost some of his stamina to repair the damage. He used his berserk strength to destroy the residual magic energy on the wound, and the flesh and fibers around the wound wriggled and knitted together under his powerful constitution, allowing the repair process to proceed without any interruption. As for the other wounds, they were caused by the light energy attacks of the Magus Golem. In order to conserve his stamina, Declan did not expend any energy to repair them. Instead, he relied on his 46 points in vitality to allow them to recover on their own. 46 points in physique. What a powerful physical advantage this was. Take the woolly rhinoceros, a common beast in the sorcerer world's dark forest, for example. Even though it was known for its defense, it only had 7 points in vitality. Most ordinary dragons have between 11 to 25 points in vitality. A super high physique brought about an extremely strong physical defense and a terrifying recovery ability. With Declan's 46 points in vitality, Even if he bound his hands and feet and allowed his enemies to attack him, weapons below level 3 would not be able to leave a single mark on his body. He could even stick his right hand into the mouth of a giant dragon, and no matter how much it bit him, it would not cause too much damage. Of course, to achieve this, Declan had to have an abundant amount of stamina and powerful elemental energy. After all, the defensive force field he formed to protect himself was formed from the combination of his physical body's vitality and wind elemental energy. Both were indispensable. Unfortunately, such a powerful physical defense was completely useless in front of that strange light energy. Streaks of terrifying, pure, holy light struck Declan's body, leaving terrifying marks that looked like high-temperature burns. If Declan did not dodge in time, the pure holy light would enter his body and purify the precious witchcraft energy. Chapter 10:15. Scattered Tower Forest, Kesslin Castle. In a secluded and mysterious secret room, a group of wizards of all shapes and sizes were staring at the enshrouded magic mirror on the conference table. Light and shadows fluctuated within the mirror, and mana vibrated. It showed the earth-shattering battle between Magi clans outside Songta City. While the Crimson family's magic weapon legion and the Fabris family's sorcerers and foreign legions were engaged in a bloody battle, the group of sorcerers were chatting idly, as though the bloody battlefield where dozens of lives were lost every minute was not worth mentioning. It was only when the strongest forces of both clans appeared, and a battle broke out between a rank 4 Magus and a rank 4 Magic Golem and a rank 3 Fire Magus. Only then did they put away their nonchalant attitudes and began to observe the family battle that was taking place tens of thousands of miles away. It's said that the Crimson family has a goblin plane that's rich in metal ores. Looks like it's true. A black-faced Magus looked at the giant metal golem that was like a small moving mountain and softly sighed in admiration. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to gather so many magic alloys, even if they dug out the entire Eloise region. I didn't expect a rank 3 Magus to last so long against Declan. Declan has really stepped on a nail this time. Another middle-aged Magus with a veil over her face laughed, taking pleasure in Declan's misfortune. The other Magi also began to comment on the battle that was taking place in the distance, but most of them were mocking and disdainful towards Declan. As the battle became more and more intense, and both sides brought out some shocking methods, these Magi finally began to seriously observe the rank 3 Fire Magus that was evenly matched with Declan. Who can tell what spell that kid is using? How can his attack penetrate Declan's defensive force field? It doesn't make sense. Someone finally asked. An old Magus with a pair of tortoise-shell glasses muttered, "This should be a very pure type of light element. It's so pure that it's ignored by the defensive force field and is treated as a natural element. That's why it's not isolated from a force field." The rest of the wizards scrutinized it a few more times and nodded in agreement with the old wizard's opinion. Light element. This was an extremely unpopular and remote natural energy. It was understandable that the defensive force field would treat it as an elemental background. If Declan had known that the Tier 3 Fire Shaman possessed such a method, he would have thought of a way to counteract the light attack. He wouldn't have been forced to passively endure the Fire Shaman's attacks. Moreover, that level 3 Fire Shaman's attack seemed a little too strong. Is that Grim really a grade 3 wizard? How could his attack power be so shocking? I calculated that his basic attack power had already reached 900 degrees, and it was consistent from start to finish. This seems to be beyond the capabilities of a Tier 3 elemental sorcerer. One of the sorcerers could not help but frown. Yeah, most Tier 3 wizards have a base attack of around 400 degrees. Even if it was an elemental specialization, it would only be able to increase its basic attack by around 100 points. How could it possibly reach 900 points? Doesn't that make them no different from us Tier 4 Magi? Someone immediately chimed in. Maybe it's the equipment he's wearing. The equipment he's wearing is very suspicious. Someone guessed. Look carefully at the ring on his right pinky finger. Finally, someone seemed to have discovered something. The magic mirror was looking down from above. At this moment, Grim was standing on top of the dragon puppet's head, casting a spell with both hands. A milky white pillar of light chased after Declan's rapidly moving body. On Declan's exposed right hand, there was a mysterious ring with an ancient design, flickering with a powerful aura of mana. The sorcerers could clearly see that the ring's magical aura was purple in color. A Tier 4 magic ring. It's a Tier 4 magic ring. The sorcerers gasped in surprise. If the owner of a Tier 4 magic ring was a Tier 4 sorcerer, it would not be surprising. However, when a Tier 4 magic ring fell into the hands of a Tier 3 sorcerer, the sorcerers could not help but sigh in their hearts. The sorcerers were well aware of how difficult it was to forge a Tier 4 magic tool. Even though the dozen or so sorcerers present were all Tier 4, the number of magic tools they possessed could be counted on one's fingers. It cannot be helped. Forging a magic tool that was compatible with one's soul and innate attributes was simply too difficult. Moreover, such an item could not be forged by others. This was why almost every high-ranked sorcerer was a qualified master alchemist. Even so, high-rank magic tools were still very rare. Now that a Tier 3 sorcerer had suddenly discovered a Tier 4 magic ring, many of the Tier 4 sorcerers present felt extremely conflicted. Looks like this magic ring came from some other plane. It can convert mana into pure light energy. The old pedant sorcerer could not help but comment. Apart from conversion, I think the magic ring can also add some light damage. Otherwise, his basic attack power would not be so high. Another sorcerer added. Everyone present was a Tier 4 magus, and every one of them was a knowledgeable magus expert. After a few comments, they were able to come up with a pretty good estimate of the strange properties of the Tier 4 magic ring. They might not be able to see the additional damage dealt by the ring, but it was able to convert their own magical energy into light energy. If this strange ability was put to good use, it would definitely be able to make their enemies suffer at a critical moment. Hence, as they continued to watch the battle, a few sorcerers could not help but reveal a trace of greed in their eyes. However, at this moment, someone suddenly interrupted. It seems that our plan to destroy the Crimson family is no longer possible. So, how should we treat this fire sorcerer? For a moment, the sorcerers were silent. After a long time, someone finally spoke. The one who spoke was an old sorcerer with white eyebrows and a beard. From the respect the sorcerers had shown him, it seemed that he had the highest status and seniority among them. Freed, a Tier 4 sorcerer, the head of the Scattered Tower Forest Association. Let's see the results of this battle. If Declan wins, we'll banish this fire sorcerer and his Crimson family from the Scattered Tower Forest. If he doesn't win, we'll give him the entire Alobis region. What if he wins? Someone could not help but ask. Is that possible? Freed said calmly. Don't forget, Declan has been a sorcerer for more than 700 years. How could he lose? I'm saying if that fire sorcerer really defeats Declan, I suggest that we give him the status and authority of a Tier 4 sorcerer and pull him into the association. No, I object. A cold, hoarse voice sounded. The sorcerers turned to look, only to discover that the one speaking was the city lord of Molten City, Alfred, who was dressed in gray robes. Why, Alfred, do you have a grudge against that kid? Someone asked in surprise. There was a beast invasion in my Molten City a few decades ago, and this fire sorcerer participated as a mission enforcer. At that time, I did not understand this kid. Now that I look at it, I'm afraid that the beast invasion was caused by this kid. So, if he wants to join the association, we'll have to settle the score between us. Alfred snorted in annoyance and gave a simple explanation. Then, is there anyone else who objects to this fire sorcerer joining the association? President Freed asked as he looked around. I object as well. This time, it was the old pedant-looking sorcerer who spoke. Matthew, why are you? Freed could not help but be stunned. I'm not objecting for myself. I'm objecting on behalf of the Salubo family. They've given me a lot of resources, so I had no choice but to stand up and oppose them. Wizard Matthew didn't hide anything, and he explained everything with a smile. All right, since there are people objecting, let's put aside the matter of pulling this fire sorcerer into the association. Let's see if he can advance to Tier 4 first. However, just as the sorcerers were having a heated discussion, the magic mirror in the middle of the secret room suddenly showed some unexpected changes. The battle outside Pine Tower City was still ongoing. High up in the sky, hidden among the thick clouds, a majestic falcon spread its wings and soared. Below, it was the battlefield where 2 Tier 4 sorcerers were fighting bitterly. Sensing the waves of terrifying mana undulations, if this falcon was just an ordinary magical creature, it would have fled long ago. Why would it stay in such a dangerous place? The falcon's sharp hind claws were tightly gripping a witchcraft crystal, and the camera was firmly focused on the fierce battle on the battlefield. Under its gaze, the battle that had lasted for 3 hours was coming to an end. Wizard Declan was about to lose. Yes, facing the powerful combination of a Tier 3 fire sorcerer and a Tier 4 magical golem dragon, Declan, who was also a Tier 4 body refinement wizard, could no longer continue fighting. The reason why he was losing so much power was because of the strange white light from the legendary fire sorcerer. Every time Declan's body was hit by the white light, his body would be burned by the high temperature, and the spell energy in his body would be consumed bit by bit. Every time Declan tried to get close to him, Grimsay, Chip's combat support system would capture it, and it would gather 3 beams of energy to attack Declan. Even with Declan's super strong vitality, it was still difficult for him to defend against energy attacks of this degree. Therefore, he was forced to retreat with injuries. In order to repair the damage, Declan had no choice but to consume a large amount of spell energy. Chapter 1016. In all his time as a level 4 wizard, Declan had never had his stamina depleted by someone. He was a physique refinement magus. His strong flesh and bones had been tempered to the point of being as powerful as a wizard weapon. His powerful defense and insane regenerative abilities made him one of the most difficult body-tempering wizards to deal with in the Scattered Tower Forest. His stamina was depleted by someone else. Such a thing was usually treated as a joke. But today, such a ridiculous thing had happened. After drinking all the healing potions on him, using up the number of uses of the healing magic wand, and depleting the wizard energy in his body, Declan was at his wit's end. But in front of him, the level 3 fire wizard and the level 4 magical puppet dragon he was riding were still full of energy, as if they still had an endless supply of magical energy to support their battle. It was something that Declan couldn't figure out no matter how hard he tried. According to his understanding, all metal magical machinery required the support of magical energy to function normally. Once the magical energy was depleted, the metal magical machinery would turn into an unmoving lump of metal, losing all ability to fight. Thus, even though most wizard families had metal puppets, they could only be used to protect core areas like the wizard's pagoda or secret dimension. If they wanted to use them outside of the wizard's pagoda, just the expenditure of magical energy crystals would be enough to bankrupt most wizards. And the massive and heavy body of the magical energy crystal in front of him would require an alarming amount of magical energy to maintain. What did the Crimson family use to power it? It couldn't be that the metal giant dragon's body was filled with magical crystals, right? In such a high-intensity battle, hundreds of magic cannons firing continuously, as well as 3 terrifying giant magic cannons. All of these required a large amount of magical energy to support them. However, even a Tier 4 body-tempering sorcerer like Declan was exhausted, yet the puppet dragon was still as powerful as ever. This is unbelievable. Halfway through the battle, Declan realized that he could not deplete the puppet dragon's energy reserves. His own stamina reserves had already fallen to a dangerous level. This was why he could only take the risk and ambush the level 3 fire wizard. Unfortunately, the other party seemed to be able to predict his intentions. Every time he advanced to a position where he could launch an attack, 3 thick energy beams would be there waiting for him to walk right into the trap. In order to avoid a pincer attack from the energy beams, Declan could only do his best to dodge, but this often meant that he would lose the opportunity to attack. With an endless supply of mana at his disposal, the Tier 3 Fire Shaman was able to fire at any position that posed a threat to him. He was also able to keep Declan under constant bombardment. Dripping water wears through stone, and rope cuts wood. In the beginning, Declan didn't care about the cannons at all. In the middle, he tried his best to dodge the cannons, and in the end, he was clumsy. He finally realized that not clearing these cannons earlier was his biggest mistake. Towards the end, under the protection of the 3 energy light pillars and the fire wizard's strange witchcraft, it was impossible for Declan to dismantle the cannons one by one. As the energy levels rose and fell, some interesting changes appeared in the battle between the two sides. At the start of the battle, Declan was the hunter with the absolute advantage. The only thing he had to worry about was facing a porcupine with spikes all over its body. He didn't know where to start, and could only move around to test the waters. Towards the end, Declan's stamina began to run out, and he could no longer charge forward as fiercely as before. Instead, he began to move around quickly. At this moment, the Golem Dragon and Grim were unusually active. They chased after Declan and fought him with all their might. At this moment, Declan had become the prey, while the Golem Dragon and Grim had become the hunters. The positions of the two sides had been swapped, and so the eagle that was soaring high above the clouds saw this absurd scene. Everything that the eagle saw was transmitted back to Kesslin Castle at the same time, shocking all the Grade 4 Magi who were secretly watching. Disgraceful scum! Declan, this soft-footed crab, he's such a disgrace. Angry shouts filled with indignation threatened to break through the spell restrictions in the secret room and overturn the castle. However, after the anger subsided, the Grade 4 Magi present could not help but feel pity for Declan. Of course, it was not Declan's idea to forcefully destroy the Crimson family. This was an order from the Fabris family's great Magus, who was stationed in the outer regions. It was said that this ancestor of the Fabris family had been entrusted by another great Magus to give this order. It was obvious that this order had already caused Declan to suffer greatly. Once he retreated from the battlefield, that Grade 3 Magus would definitely control the Grade 4 Golem Dragon and chase after the Fabris family's troops. The high-ranked Magi might be able to escape successfully, but the Fabris family's troops and foreign army would probably lose more than half of their forces. Even with the Fabris family's strength, they would probably spit out 3 liters of blood. Hence, within the secret room, President Fred's voice immediately sounded. Elder Nicholas, your family's territory is the closest to the Alobes region. Send a team to rescue the elites of the Fabris family. Remember, do not engage in any direct conflict with that fire wizard. Prioritize saving them. Clara, inform Lauren in Rain City. Tell him to immediately contact the Crimson family. Tell them that the association has already recognized their right to rule Alobes. This family war has also ended with the Fabris family's defeat. During the war, the Fabris family will repay any losses the Crimson family suffers tenfold. No, 100-fold. However, we request that they do not massacre Magi and Acolytes. As for the secular army and foreign army, let them do as they please. A series of orders were quickly passed down. A few Magi nodded in acknowledgement, their bodies exploding into black fog and disappearing from the secret room. It turned out that the bodies that appeared in the secret room in Kesslin Castle were all illusions created by a projection spell. Of course, they were all in their own secret rooms in the Wizard's Pagoda. In the blink of an eye, more than half of the level 4 Magi in the secret room had disappeared, leaving only President Fred and Elder Milva, who were deep in thought. The two of them had attended the meeting in their original forms. What do you think of today's events? President Fred suddenly asked. If I'm not wrong, that Fire Wizard Grim has a 40% chance of advancing to level 4. It's worth befriending someone like him. Elder Milva replied, after some thought. But Matthew and Alfred, Fred could not help but mutter. Their opinions are not worth mentioning. I heard that the Crimson family's development in the north isn't going well. Although they've hooked up with the Destiny Witches, they've been ostracized by other witch factions. Not long ago, they even started a war with the Chilly Winter Witches. I heard that the chilly winter witches were the ones who lost. That's unbelievable. Oh, there's such a thing? As the president of the Scattered Tower Forest Association, Fred controlled all the magi in the central part of the continent. Every day, he had to take care of all the miscellaneous matters. How could he care about the conflict between factions in the far north? However, since this matter involved the Crimson family, he had no choice but to care. Send someone to investigate the relationship between this Grim and the Witch of Destiny in the north. If he's not a spy planted in the central part of the continent, we can consider pulling him into the association. Ahem, our Scattered Tower Forest Association hasn't had a new face for more than 200 years, right? It's about time we get some new blood. As the two higher-ups in charge of the Scattered Pagoda Forest Association left the secret room, the place once again became quiet and serene. The Magi and Acolytes of the Fabris family who had stepped on a battlefield would never have thought that their fates would be decided by a few rank 4 Magi tens of thousands of miles away. When Wizard Decan's stamina dropped to an extremely dangerous level, he finally put down the dignity and glory of a rank 4 Magus and began to run away. The tens of thousands of Magi, Acolytes, foreign warriors, and high-level mercenaries who witnessed this scene were all stunned. By the time they realized that something was wrong, the Magi of the Crimson family had already led the Magic Machine Legion towards them. It was still the same two teams with the same cruel and ruthless warriors. However, when the situation changed, the mentality of both sides was completely different. Previously, the Fabris family was in charge of the attack, while the Crimson family was in charge of the defense. Now, the Crimson family was in charge of the attack, while the Fabris family was in charge of the defense. The Fabris family wizards had yet to break free from their extreme shock and fear when the gigantic golem dragon led the metal magic machines that covered the mountains and plains to kill them. By the time they realized what was going on, the energy fireballs and the energy beams shot out by the magic golem dragon had already overturned the position of the Magi of the Fabris family. Amidst the earth-shattering waves of magic, the broken bodies of the Magi and Acolytes were blown up into the sky. Flesh and blood splattered everywhere. The Magi who had lost their will to fight back could barely fight back for 2 rounds. Without hesitation, they abandoned their position and quickly fled into the distance. The foreign army, the mutated beast army, and the common army were left behind to stop the Crimson family's troops. As the two sides chased and fled, they fought and killed each other, spreading the flames of war to an even wider area. Chapter 10:17. The Fabris family had been defeated. The pursuit and killing continued on the battlefield, but this news had spread like a plague in all directions. Every single person or organization that heard this news did not believe their own ears and eyes, and tried all sorts of ways to verify and investigate. By the time they obtained accurate information through all sorts of channels, time was no longer in their hands. Currently, the Alobis region was a chaotic battlefield and also a huge whirlpool. Almost all the Magus organizations in the area were involved in this. All these years, the Crimson family's wanton expansion and invasions had already chased away all the Magus organizations in the Alobis region. When the family war broke out this time, due to the Fabris family's immense influence, those losers, opportunists also came out from various corners and cracks in the walls, becoming the outer army that waved the flag and shouted for the Fabris family and called for the rebels to surrender. The Fabris family did not reject these allies who had come uninvited. After all, before completely defeating the Crimson family, the Fabris family's Magi still needed to clench their fists and not disperse their strength prematurely. Hence, the Magi of the Fabris family turned a blind eye to these vultures that wanted to take advantage of the battle between the two great Magus families to take advantage of them and plunder some resources, ignoring them. After all, when the Crimson family was defeated, the territories and resource points that they had seized would be returned to the Fabris family untouched. Taking advantage of them early on and gathering some resources was not a big deal. Hence, while the main forces of the Fabris family were engaged in the final battle with the Crimson family outside Pine Tower City, The Magus organizations and organizations that had infiltrated the Alobes region were enjoying a sumptuous feast, squeezing and plundering everything that originally belonged to the Crimson family. Perhaps the illustrious reputation of the Fabris family in the past had given them some misconceptions, causing them to relax their vigilance. They did not constantly pay attention to the final battle that would decide the fate of the Alobes region. Hence, when the rank 4 Magus Declan abandoned the battle and fled, and the elite forces of the Fabris family abandoned the Magus Beast Army, the mutated Beast Army, the Foreign Army, and the other vassal forces, and began to retreat at full speed, the battlefield between the two sides quickly spread in all directions. A top-notch Magus could decide the fate of a war. Even if the elite main forces of the Fabris family were still present, even if the overall battle power of the Fabris family was several times that of the Crimson family, when the family's strongest battle power was defeated and fled, all of these became illusions and instantly collapsed. Those wizards with flying magic beasts quickly summoned their mounts and fled the battlefield as fast as they could. The rest of the elite troops also displayed their own strengths, no longer attempting to engage the Crimson forces in battle. They did their best to shake off their pursuers and quickly fled to the border of the Alobes region. On the other hand, the peripheral troops didn't have such discipline and ability. After being attacked by the Crimson Devil Army a few times, they were completely routed. These fellows came from all over the world and possessed all kinds of strange abilities. Some could summon land magical beasts to gallop. Some could transform into crows, deer, and gophers to hide. Some could use their innate skills to hide in towns or small cities. And some could kneel down and surrender. Faced with the ant colony that seemed to have exploded, the Crimson family did not disperse their forces to hunt and kill these trash. Instead, they gathered their forces and chased after the elites of the enemy families that still maintained their formation. If there was a god that could overlook the entire Alobes region from the sky, they would discover that the elite main forces of the Fabris family were fighting and fleeing at the same time, doing their best to escape to the border. The Crimson family's main forces used giant airships, goblin war chariots, and other vehicles to take a detour and rush to a key pass, hoping to intercept the enemy. As the two sides chased and fled, the battlefield spread to every corner of the Alobes region. When a large net of war instantly covered the entire Alobes region, those who originally didn't belong to the Fabris family and had only come to take advantage of the situation were in big trouble. By the time they realized that something was wrong and wanted to leave, every main road and key pass around them had become an area where the Fabris family and the Crimson family fought fiercely. They were like pitiful, unlucky people sandwiched between two berserk elephants. They no longer had the chance to escape or leave. These opportunists and fence-sitters had swaggered into the Crimson family's territory and resource points, chasing away or imprisoning the magi and acolytes that the Crimson family had stationed here. They then began to plunder and exploit all sorts of resources and wealth without restraint. However, just as they were happily enjoying this rare feast, the situation around them took a turn for the worse. The entire Alobes region had become a bloody battlefield where the two large families fought and killed each other. These small Magus organizations and factions that had placed their bets on the wrong person were caught in the middle. They were all as anxious as ants on a hot pan, desperately looking for a chance to escape. It was a pity that the two large families were currently in a frenzy. One was fleeing with all their might, while the other was chasing with all their might. How could they have the leisure to verify the factions and authenticity of these allies? Any faction that didn't have a clear affiliation would be killed as long as they ran into the hands of the two large families. Hence, many teams sent out by small Magus organizations and factions were slaughtered by the two large families without even realizing it. Of course, there were also some leaders who were smart enough to immediately invite the imprisoned magi and acolytes out. They were treated to good food and drinks and then promised them great benefits. Only then did they manage to wash themselves clean and become an ally of the Crimson family. However, these opportunists were just that shameless. Once they had washed themselves clean, they immediately joined the Crimson faction. Conversely, they became the most enthusiastic group of people who chased after the Fabris family's deserters. Hence, while the pursuers and deserters of the two large families were locked in a fierce battle, all sorts of unimaginable and absurd stories of betrayal and loyalty were happening all over Eloise. Pebble Valley. This was a long valley between two majestic mountains. It was also a key pass between the southwestern borders of the Eloise region. This was originally the territory of the Crimson family. However, following the outbreak of the war between the families, the Crimson family's army retreated to Pine Tower City, and this place became an abandoned stronghold. In the afternoon, the azure sky was bustling with noise and excitement. A giant silver-white airship carrying hundreds of combat magic machines rushed here, with the intention of reclaiming the stronghold in one fell swoop. However, when close to 400 combat magic machines rushed down from the airship and arranged themselves into battle formations to attack the stronghold, a silver-gray flag was raised on the tallest stone tower in the stronghold. On it was the image of a blood-dripping spear, and this image represented an illustrious name in the Terran region, the Randner family. The Crimson Magus leading the Magic Machine Squad was the Grade 2 Blood Knight Soros. Seeing the flag of the Randner family fluttering above the stronghold, he immediately stopped the troops behind him and began to size up the stronghold in front of him. As if noticing the arrival of the Crimson family's Magic Machine Squad, the gate of the stronghold opened, and a group of magi, riding on special magic colts, rushed out. The leader was a man. His face was full of crisscrossing scratches and densely packed stitches. At first glance, it looked as if his head had been split into pieces and was tied back together with a simple hemp rope. Soros' heart sank. The monster leading the other party was a Grade 3 Magus. The broken face, Magus rode his magic colt to the front of the Crimson family's troops and looked down at Soros from above. When the pair of murky eyes with only white stared at him, even a vampire like Soros felt a chill down his spine. "I'm Gallo of the Randner family. I am here to inform you on the orders of Clara. Your battle with the Fabris family must not cross the border and must be limited to the Eloise region. If any party violates this rule, the Randner family has the right to correct it." Soros' scarlet eyes flickered a few times, and he protested, "But this valley was originally our family's property, my lord, not anymore." The Magus Gallo said coldly, "In order to ensure that you do not violate the rules, this valley and this stronghold have been temporarily expropriated by us. When the battle is over, we will naturally return it to you. Now you can leave." Following the Magus Gallo's blatant threat, the hundreds of family warriors riding magic colts behind him slowly pressed forward. From their aura and the energy they emitted, it could be seen that this was a team of magi with powerful combat abilities. Although the members of the team did not necessarily have the identity of a Magus, with the help of the strange magic colts and the mysterious armor, they had the basic combat ability of a Magus. Moreover, the leader was a Grade 3 Magus and 5 Grade 2 Magi. With this kind of strength, it would not be a problem to overturn the Crimson family's Magic Machine Squad of less than 400 people. The muscles on Soros' face twitched a few times. After thinking for a moment, he finally waved his hand and led the Magic Machine Squad to retreat half a mile, and then hurriedly contacted the higher-ups of the Crimson family. But just as they were waiting for their orders, a large group of the Fabris family's defeated army surged over from afar. Just as Soros was about to lead his men to intercept them, the Magic Colt Squad cut in front of them and blocked their path. "Lord Gallo, what are you trying to do?" Soros could not help but shout. "Exercising our authority to monitor the battlefield. You can..." Hearing the other party's casual reply, Soros' nose almost went crooked from anger. "Fine, you win." Chapter 1018. Pine Tower City. Inside the floating warship, Gargamel's face was full of anger as he turned off the communication spell. He then stood up and left the command hall. He walked through a long metal corridor and arrived at the door of a secret room. Asterisk knock knock knock. Asterisk with a few light knocks. The all-metal door split open in the middle and slid into the walls on both sides without a sound. Inside the secret room, Grim was naked from the waist up while Mary and Alice carefully treated his wounds. What do you need to report now? Don't you know that the head of the house is receiving treatment? Mary frowned and asked with dissatisfaction. Gargamel smiled awkwardly. Tell me, what happened? Grim saw many things from Gargamel's expression and took the initiative to ask. The magic mechanical legion we sent to the border area has been stopped. What? There are still people who dare to block our way at this time? Who is it? Hurry up and tell me who it is. I'll go and tear them apart right now. Mary's blood-red eyes immediately lit up when she heard this, and she looked eager to give it a try. The Rander family's dripping spears appeared in the southwest, the Intim family's white ghosts appeared in the northwest, and the Banta family's swamp wyverns appeared in the north as well. The other family's troops also appeared in the other directions. The magic troops we were in charge of chasing after them were all blocked. They were only blocked, and there was no direct confrontation, right? Grim frowned and asked. No. Gargamel shook his head. All the Magus family's troops said that they were under the orders of the association and were in charge of monitoring the battlefield. They did not directly attack our families. Grim pondered for a moment and turned to look at Alice. Alice's gentle and beautiful face showed a trace of anticipation. She explained to Grim in a low voice, they did not attack, which means that the higher-ups of the association do not want to fall out with us for the time being. By blocking our troops, they want to tell us that there is a limit to battles that cannot be crossed. From the looks of it, the association has tacitly allowed us to rule the entire Alobis region, but they will not allow the flames of war to spread to the outside world. He said he wanted to fight us, so he came to fight us. He said we can't fight back, so we can't fight back? Humph, this group of old bastards, they really control too much. Mary's temper was still as fiery as before, and she looked angry. Grim sighed and turned to Gargamel. Inform all the magi of the family that the main target is still the Fabris family. As for enemies other than the Fabris family, temporarily delay the pursuit. However, all enemies within Alovis territory who haven't surrendered by midnight tonight will be killed. Yes. Gargamel bowed and was about to leave to pass on the order, but he was stopped by Grim. I've listened to Lady Mary's recount of the recent happenings in the family. You did very well. You didn't let me down. This is what I should do. He's not worthy of Sir's praise. Hearing Grim's praise, Gargamel's gloomy face immediately revealed an unconcealable smile. This time, I also obtained some good things from the other world. Count this as your reward. After saying this, Grim took out 3 strange purple bottles from his storage ring and stuffed them into Gargamel's hands. These 3 potions, one is a bloodline reconstruction potion, and the other 2 are bloodline purification potions. You currently have the strength of a high-grade Grade 1 Magus, but you're still far from the peak of Grade 1. With the bloodline reconstruction potion, you'll be able to obtain the bloodline of the Black Mamba Serpent tribe. They also seem to be poisonous and will be compatible with your innate Magus talent. More importantly, after becoming a bloodline Magus, your lifespan will also be extended to a certain extent. After using 2 more bloodline purification potions, it should be enough for you to advance to Grade 2. Grim warned Gargamel about many things that he needed to pay attention to, but at this moment, Gargamel looked as if he had been struck by lightning. His entire being was in a daze, and he had completely lost control of himself. All he knew was to hold the 3 potions and laugh foolishly. Others might not know about his situation, but Gargamel clearly knew that he only had 11 years left to live. Ever since he had become Grim's butler in the scattered Tower Forest region, he had worked day and night for the sake of the Crimson family, almost abandoning his potioneering profession. His innate talent was not good, and being able to become a Grade 1 Magus was already a blessing from the heavens. Hence, he had never expected to advance to Grade 2. The reason why he worked so hard for Grim and the Crimson family was not for himself, but because he hoped that Grim would look at his hard work and treat the forest demon Ava and his precious daughter Amelia well. However, at this moment, just as his life was about to come to an end, a huge gift fell onto his head. Not only could he continue to live, but he could also live a better and more comfortable life than before. This kind of good news almost broke his heart, causing him to feel dizzy. He did not know if everything that was happening in front of him was a dream or reality. Grim shook his head in annoyance as he looked at Gargamel, who had bitten the back of his hand and jumped up in pain. Looks like I'll be the one giving the orders. I think Gargamel has gone crazy. As soon as Mary said this, Gargamel immediately woke up and hugged the 3 potions tightly, as if he was hugging the most important things in his life. I'll go now. After saying this, he jogged out of the secret room. After the door to the secret room was closed, Mary turned around and smiled sweetly at Grim. Looks like you've obtained quite a lot of good things from your trip to another world. You've already prepared a gift for that foolish Magus, so what about mine? Mary said as she gently ground her canine teeth, as if saying, if you don't have a gift, I'll bite you. Mary was now a grade 3 vampire Magus, and if she bit him, even Grim's spiritual force would be greatly damaged. Don't. Let's use force, not words. Don't you want a gift? Here. Grim hurriedly took out 2 tightly sealed clay jars from his storage ring and handed them to Mary. Mary took them and looked at the clay seal that was full of mysterious runes. She then looked at the vase that was made in a foreign world, and the craftsmanship seemed to be a little rough. This clay jar was obviously handmade by someone. Due to the rushed work, the jar was not perfectly round, and even the colors on the patterns had mostly fallen off. She raised it up and shook it. It was obvious that it was filled with some kind of viscous and heavy liquid. This caused Mary's ruby red eyes to light up. She used her sharp fingertip to break the clay seal and dipped it into the black and red viscous liquid. Mary almost screamed out loud. Grade 3. This is the blood of a grade 3 creature. Are you sure these are for me? Mary was so excited that even her red eyes shone. Grim nodded, as if it was a matter of course. If not for Mary, he wouldn't have spent so much effort to lure a group of grade 3 golden knights into a trap in the Invictus Plain. In that earth-shattering battle, Grim, Tess, and Eteriel, the 3 wizards, were all severely injured. However, the Holy Knights were even worse off. First, they were ruthlessly trapped by the witchcraft traps that the witches had buried under the poison swamp. Then, taking advantage of the moment when they were in a state of confusion and panic, the 3 wizards worked together to defeat the 7 grade 3 golden knights. They attacked fiercely at all costs, leaving the 7 grade 3 golden knights in the poison swamp forever. The blood of the golden knights was extracted, tempered, and sealed in clay jars. This was done by Tess herself. After that, their holy light souls were taken away by Grim, leaving only broken corpses for the witches. Among the remaining deception witches, there were obviously people who were good at making wizard beasts or corpse puppets. With this batch of high-quality Holy Knights corpses, they could create a terrifying team of wizard beasts. With the protection of this team of wizard beasts, they would undoubtedly be more confident. As long as they didn't run into the 2 grade 4 Holy Knights, the witches had a high chance of surviving in the Invictus Plain. As for whether or not to rescue them, it was the internal affairs of the deception witches, and Grim didn't care about it. Therefore, as soon as they returned to the sorcerer world, Grim parted ways with Eteriel and went their separate ways. Grim briefly told Mary and Alice about the old story and then glossed over it. Mary happily took the 2 clay jars and went to another secret room to taste them, leaving Grim and Alice in the room. When only he and Alice were left in the room, Grim smirked and lightly patted his thigh. Alice rolled her eyes at him, blushed, and sat on his thighs shyly. Grim pulled Alice into his arms and buried his face into her silky, long hair. Sniffing her body fragrance, Grim let out a long sigh. He felt a trace of exhaustion from the inside out. In the 5 years he had been running around in the other world, Grim had never had a good rest or sleep. He spent almost every moment fighting with others or being on guard. Even when he was trapped in an underground volcano, he didn't dare to let go and sleep. He could only use meditation to replace sleep. The continuous battles, the repeated injuries. Although most of his injuries had healed, the accumulated fatigue and tiredness had deeply etched into his spirit and soul. After returning to his family, he didn't even have time to rest before he threw himself into the battle with the Grade 4 wizards. Even a man made of steel wouldn't be able to bear the weight of all these things. Therefore, he buried his face in Alice's hair, inhaled the fragrance of the beauty in his arms, and said a few words to her in a daze. Then, he fell into a deep sleep. Chapter 1019. The battle between the two families that had lasted for over half a year had finally come to an end. One side was a large family with a Grade 4 magus, while the other was a rising family that had risen rapidly. However, the outcome of the battle was completely out of everyone's expectations. It turned out that the Crimson family had withstood the repeated attacks of the Fabris family, and finally emerged victorious in a battle of the highest level of magi outside Pine Tower City. Although the Crimson family did not have a Grade 4 magus, with the combination of a Grade 3 fire magus and a Grade 4 magical golem dragon, they were no weaker than ordinary Grade 4 magi. According to the evaluation of many experienced magi, the legendary fire magus who had single-handedly created the Crimson family had a high chance of advancing to Grade 4. This was undoubtedly top-notch information that was as deep as the ocean. Grade 4. In most planes, this was already the upper limit of the power that the plane could contain. If one took another step, they would be shackled and rejected by the mother of the plane, and could only head to the outer regions to find a new place to stay. Within the plane, Grade 4 was the supreme king, and in the eyes of mortals, they were the so-called gods. When you were a Tier 3 sorcerer, if you wanted to have your own organization or faction, you would have to work hard and toil day and night. However, once you became a Tier 4 sorcerer, there would be plenty of sorcerer organizations and forces that would come running to you without even the slightest bit of effort or hard work. They would cry and beg to become your direct subordinates. This was the difference between Grade 3 and Grade 4. However, the step between Grade 3 and Grade 4 was abnormally difficult. For the Magus world's unique Magus growth system, as long as you had the talent to become a Magus, you could enter the Wizard's Pagoda to learn and grow. However, depending on the level of talent, almost 80% of Magus acolytes were blocked from becoming a Magus. For acolytes to become a Magus, 60% depended on their talent and potential, and the remaining 40% depended on luck. Once they became a magus, they would immediately become a phoenix, rising to the top and becoming the true master of the magus world. However, this was only for the human kingdoms. In the real magus community, Grade 1 magi could only be used as cannon fodder and targets to be exploited. The ambitious magi struggled at the bottom of various magus families, organizations, and factions, fighting and scheming against each other for a bit of magus resources. Strictly speaking, the competition and elimination in the magus world was even more intense and cruel than the scheming between the nobles of the human kingdoms. The fall of a magus could lead to the collapse of a noble family. The rise of a magus could create the birth of a glorious human kingdom. On the surface, the separation and reunification of secular countries and the replacement of generations seemed to be a natural evolution and the inevitability of historical development. Before the rise of the Crimson family, there were 7 Magus families and factions in the Magus world. Before the rise of the Crimson family, there were 7 large and small Magus families and organizations in the Alobis region, as well as close to 100 noble territories. Magus world was a Magus in. These large and small territories, as well as the 5 human kingdoms, all belonged to different Magus families or factions. They gathered resources and took root in new blood. However, with the end of the war between the Crimson family and the Fabris family, the human kingdoms and aristocratic territories in the Alobis region experienced a reshuffle and restructuring. Countless influential families that stood on the wrong side during the war were overthrown and purged, while even more middle and low-level nobles who stood firmly on the Crimson Empire's side took the opportunity to rise in power, occupying vast and fertile lands one after another. In the entire Alobis region, there were no other Magus organizations or factions. There was only one voice left, and that was the Crimson family, which was at its peak. Under these circumstances, the territories of all the nobles were like pieces of flesh and bones that had been shattered. Under the guidance of a powerful will, they began to gather together, fuse, and strengthen. With the blazing flame monarch and Pine Tower City at the center, the embryonic form of an extremely large human kingdom began to appear. The conflict at the borders did not actually happen. Faced with the overbearing elite forces of the various large Magus families, the higher-ups of the Crimson family did not let the sudden victory get to their heads. They did not continue to challenge the Magus order in the scattered Tower Forest. Large numbers of the Fabris family's main magi had escaped from the Alobis region with the help of external forces. However, 60% of the low-ranked forces were abandoned on the battlefield. A portion of them had been annihilated by the Crimson family, while the rest had been captured. The Frost Giant Army's attacks were incomparably fierce, but once they fled in panic, they became the main target of the Crimson family due to their large size and slow movements. Nearly 40% of the Frost Giant warriors died on the way. The remaining could only helplessly surrender under the lead of 2 Frost Giant wizards. They sat cross-legged in a valley, closely monitored by the Crimson family. As for the other army of mutated beasts, although they could flee as fast as the wind, they were not familiar with the terrain. Thus, after losing the leadership of the Fabris family magi, they were like a group of headless flies, rushing left and right in the vast territory of the Alobis region. They did not know where to escape to. When the Crimson family cut off all paths to the outside world, they became a group of birds in a cage, turtles in a jar. They had nowhere to run. Originally, the Crimson family had the intention of subduing some of the mutated beasts for research. Unfortunately, these mutated beasts did not have complete intelligence and self-awareness like the Frost Giants. The battle commands etched in the depths of their souls caused them to only listen to the commands of specific magi. Thus, there was no way to subdue them. Thus, a giant floating ship carrying a large number of battle magic machines caught up to them, completely surrounding them in a vast wilderness. As for the special gargoyle team, they protected the Fabris family's floating wooden ship all the way out of the Alobis region. Along the way, the Crimson family tried to stop them a few times, but they were all destroyed by the Fabris family's rank 3 magi. This unprecedented defeat lasted for 5 whole days, affecting the entire territory of Alobis. For a time, the entire Alobis region was like a huge war ruin. Cities, castles, and manors that had been toppled and destroyed could be seen everywhere. Corpses of mutated beasts of all shapes and sizes could be seen everywhere. Thick smoke could be seen everywhere, and the devastated land was everywhere. After destroying and capturing the remaining combat forces of the Fabris family, the Crimson family spent another half a month to clean up all the mutated beasts and wizards that had escaped to the various villages or remote areas. It was only on the 13th of September that the battle within Alobis' borders ended. The battle between the Fabris family and the Crimson family finally ended with the Crimson family's complete victory. However, the price of victory was also very heavy. Due to the unbridled fighting and destruction on both sides, a total of 7 Magus resource points, a dozen human cities, hundreds of castles and manors, and tens of thousands of acres of food crops were destroyed in this battle. According to the incomplete statistics after the war, the number of Crimson citizens who died because of this family war was as high as 210,000. With a different perspective on life, one's attitude towards this war was completely different. If you were a normal Magus citizen, then this war would only bring you and your family endless suffering and a painful past that was unbearable to recall. However, if you were a Magus that had survived, then you could celebrate to your heart's content. This was because the war had been won. Even if the Crimson family had suffered huge losses in this war, The tangible and intangible benefits that they would obtain after victory were immeasurable. Just the recognition of the Scattered Pagoda's association towards the Crimson family's authority was something that could not be bought with money. From now onwards, the Alobis region would become the Crimson family's private property. All the resources, territory, citizens, forests, and mineral deposits in this land would belong to the Crimson family. This was something that was rarely seen in the Central Continent. In the Scattered Pagodas in the Central Continent, there were a total of 31 areas of human activity, which were divided into 31 different regions. Every region had a rough outline that separated them from each other. In this vast and boundless land, there were hundreds and thousands of Magus families and powerful Magus organizations or factions. They were scattered all over these 31 regions, competing and opposing each other, but also coexisting. Among so many families, organizations, and powers, only Tier 4 powers were capable of occupying an entire region by themselves. A Rank 4 faction referred to an organization or faction that had a Rank 4 Magus. This was also the most important prerequisite for a Magus family, organization, or faction to monopolize an area. A faction that did not receive the recognition of others could not peacefully rule for a long time, even if they used their tyrannical strength to drive away all their competitors. The Crimson family was an obvious example. Previously, the Crimson family did not have a Rank 4 Magus. They only had a Rank 4 war magic machine that had not been tested in the Magus War. Hence, their ruling position had never been recognized by the Scattered Pagodas, and it was not surprising that such a family war broke out. Now that the Scattered Pagodas Association had recognized the Crimson family's authority over the entire Alobis region, it was equivalent to recognizing the Crimson family as a Rank 4 faction. The latter's influence was earth-shattering in the Central Continent. It had to be known that the Scattered Pagodas region in the Central Continent only had a total of 14 Rank 4 Magi. Moreover, it had been several hundred years since a new Rank 4 Magus had appeared in the Scattered Pagodas region. According to research done by some busybodies, there were only 3 Rank 3 Magi who had the highest chance of advancing to Rank 4. Chapter 10:20 Blazing Flame Monarch. An exceptionally luxurious and grand celebration banquet was being held in the Molten Hall. Over 100 official magi belonging to the Crimson family gathered here with smiles on their faces, toasting and celebrating as they waited for the higher-ups of the family to appear. The first to arrive at the banquet was naturally the gnome Great Sage Cabby, who had the most connections and resources. Also present with it was the leader of the Goblin Mechanical Warlock, Violent Blood Group, Dushala Tarzan, who commanded more than 300 Goblin Mechanical Warlocks. La Lazare. Once they arrived, they went straight to a corner of the hall, where they found the demonized Goblin leader, Dean Gonga, and the Goblin Princess, Vanessa. The 5 of them gathered together and started chatting enthusiastically. If the Goblin Tigule, who was a Tier 2 Magus, was added to the mix, then the 5 heads of the Crimson family's Goblin faction would be gathered together. What they discussed the most, other than the losses suffered by the Goblins during the War of the Sorcerers, was also how the Goblin merchant associations would occupy business opportunities in the large-scale reconstruction of their territories after the war, as well as how to deal with the challenges and opportunities of the outside world. But privately, what they were most concerned about was the possible reward from the Crimson family. Through various covert channels, the few Goblin leaders had already found out that the hero who had worked the hardest in this battle, the Scarlet Butler Gego, had already received an internal reward from the Lord family head. The Giant Snake Sorcerer's Bloodline Regeneration Potion and Bloodline Purification Potion. With these things, no matter how low the Gargamel's innate talent was, he would still have an 80% chance of successfully advancing to Rank 2 and changing his bloodline innate talent to the noble giant serpent bloodline. For the Gargamel, who was on the verge of death, this was no less than a reshaping of his body, extending his lifespan by another 1 or 200 years. The deep meaning contained within this made the few Goblin big bosses at the scene extremely envious, yet they could not reach it. After all, Gargamel had worked day and night for the Crimson family for the past few decades. His achievements were obvious to all, and no one could deny him. As for the other Scarlet Magnate, Witch Winley, she was the master's disciple and was loyal to her teacher. Thus, she also obtained a powerful fire dragon bloodline. The reason why the two of them were forcefully promoted by the Patriarch was naturally due to their status, achievements, and loyalty. No matter how envious, jealous, and hateful others were, they could only drool, and they were powerless to fight with them for anything. To be honest, a core magus whose lifespan was about to run out at any time was hard to be at ease in managing a long-term, healthy, and stable operation of a family with them at the center. After extending Gargamel and Winley's lifespan, it also effectively stabilized the core of the Crimson family. As for raising their ranks, it would prevent the family's core magi, who were only at rank 1, from ordering around a bunch of rank 2 and 3 magi. As the manager of a family, having the strength of a grade 2 expert was enough. If he forcefully promoted it to tier 3, it would be a huge waste of combat power and resources. Of course, before making these decisions, Grimm might not have considered the matter so deeply or so far ahead. However, the experience he had gained over 100 years and the foresight of a superior made it easy for him to handle such matters. Moreover, the entire Crimson family was created by him. Within the family, he was the absolute authority that stood by his words. Many things did not need to be carefully thought out. As long as he did as he pleased, he would be able to achieve a good result. After all, the strength of a family was measured by the top-level combat power within the family. As for the number and development of low-ranked magi, they were just the icing on the cake. Even after Grimm left the Crimson family, he was still a grade 3 legendary fire magus that everyone respected. If he wanted to create a family or faction, he only needed to say the word, and he could easily reach a level that low-ranked magi could not achieve even after hundreds of years of hard work. Without Grimm, the Crimson family status would drop in an instant. Even with the support of 2 grade 3 magi, it would still be difficult to achieve the current situation and level. A powerful grade 3 magus could not even be compared to 3 to 5 other magi of the same rank. This was one of the main reasons why Grimm was given the title of legendary and was renowned in the scattered forest of towers. After being envious of Gargamel, the few goblin powerhouses could not help but think about the hidden dangers of the goblin faction. Similar to Gargamel, other than the goblin princess Vanessa who had turned into a mechanical magus, the rest of the goblin powerhouses all had the same problem, which was the short lifespan of the goblin tribe. On average, goblins only had half the lifespan of humans. Even though they had been pampered all these years and had consumed many precious magi resources, they were still unable to change the shackles of their inferior goblin bloodline. The goblin great sage Kirby was slightly better. He had taken the path of a magus, and, as a grade 1 goblin magus, he had a lifespan of more than 100 years. With the addition of some magus rituals, his lifespan had been increased to the limit, barely reaching 170 years. After such a long period of torment, he had less than 20 years left to live. 20 years. It might sound like a long time, but for a sorcerer, it was a very short time. Hence, all these years, Kirby had been searching for resources or methods that could fundamentally change the shackles of his life. The bloodline regeneration potion that appeared in the family was undoubtedly the safest and most reliable one. Although Kirby claimed to be one of the elders of the Crimson family, as Grimm continued to advance, the gap between their statuses grew larger and larger. It was difficult for Kirby to enter the decision-making ranks of the family. Most of the time, it was difficult for it to even see Grimm. The other gnome leaders were facing the same predicament as Cabby. The leader of the Goblin Mechanical Warlock Explosive Blood Group, Dushra Lasale, was already 48 years old. In human terms, he was close to 100 years old. The leader of the Demonized Goblins, Dean Gonga, was 73 years old. He had far exceeded the lifespan of an ordinary goblin, and no one knew how long his demonized body could last. The Goblin War God, Tigula, was only 45 years old. He was the youngest of the goblins. With its identity and status, it would not be a problem for it to extend its life for another 10 or 20 years. However, even if he used the best and most expensive life-extending ritual, he would not be able to live for another 100 years. Hence, the problem of extending his life was one of the biggest problems he was concerned about. Just as the few goblin powerhouses were whispering in a corner of the hall, there was a commotion at the entrance. Winley, the core magus of the Crimson family, was escorted by a group of magi into the molten hall. After years of nourishment from her bloodline and the fires of war, Winley had changed from her gentle and elegant appearance to a dignified and domineering one. Her bright red dragonskin armor had been carefully tailored and processed, completely fitting her youthful and hot body. Her breasts were perky and her buttocks were perky, showing off her curvaceous and perfect figure without a doubt. The violent and ferocious aura of the fire dragon bloodline made her body abnormally hot and flirtatious, and the heat was overwhelming. If not for the fact that they were familiar with her, Kirby and the others would have thought that she was a different person. When Winley walked into the molten hall with her head held high and chest puffed out, the temperature in the hall seemed to have risen by 5 degrees. This was the underground molten hall, which was more than 200 meters below the surface. The floor they were standing on was a surging sea of lava. As the Crimson family's head was a legendary fire magus, the temperature in the molten hall was maintained at around 60 to 70 degrees in order to create an atmosphere that matched the family's attributes. Normal humans could not survive here. Even weak magi like Kirby and Ganga could only rely on the fire resistance pendant and the cooling ring to move around freely. As for the other magi, although most of them did not like the scorching and sulfuric environment, they were still grade 1 magi and had no problem enduring such high temperatures. After becoming a fire dragon witch, Winley's bloodline had completely adapted to the environment here. Hence, under the interaction of her aura, the fire elemental particles in the molten hall became abnormally restless and active. Cabby and the others could see that although the magi surrounding Winley were all smiling, their foreheads and cheeks were covered in sweat. It was obvious that they were having a hard time withstanding the fire elemental energy that the fire dragon, which was constantly emitting. What was rare was that despite the discomfort, they still pretended to be calm and did not show any signs of discomfort on their faces. Following the Crimson family's defeat of another powerful enemy, the family's influence and scale were about to explode once again. At this time, whoever could gain the favor of the higher-ups of the family and occupy the best position would undoubtedly rise quickly. Hence, even if they were crying for their parents, no magus was willing to distance themselves from this core magus of the Crimson family. Just as everyone gathered around Winley and whispered to each other, there was another commotion at the entrance of the molten hall. Several grade 2 magi of the family, with different appearances, walked in one after another. There was the tall and mighty draconian Zachary, the gnome Tigule who only reached the draconian's calf, the insect Lich Bliss who always hid in a thick robe, the 2 blood knights Soros and Windsal, the 3 blood elves Iase, Lilia, and Spara, as well as the clone Brain Gru who remained in the family after the war. Their arrival caused the atmosphere of the banquet to become lively once more. The magi who were familiar with each other greeted each other and lightly clinked their wine glasses before downing their drinks. The banquet hall was filled with laughter and cheers, filled with words of praise for the great family leader. At this moment, the entrance of the hall suddenly fell silent. Everyone held their wine glasses and turned their heads, casting their gazes on a certain magus who was walking over with large strides. Sensing the strange and mysterious changes on the other party, all the magi could not help but feel a fire burning in their hearts, their eyes shining. Gargamel. Chapter 10:21. Gargamel was accompanied by the forest demon Ava and the demonic woman Amelia as he walked into the hall. To be honest, if it weren't for the 2 women, no one would believe that the middle-aged magus in front of them was the famous Scarlet Butler, Gargamel. In the past, Gargamel had wrinkled skin like dried tree bark. His skin was loose, his eyes were heavy, and he had an aquiline nose. On his bald head, there was only a faint circle of yellow hair. The first impression he gave people was that he was sinister and cunning. But now, Gargamel's stooped figure had become straight, and the skin on his face had become smooth and clean again. However, his complexion was a little dark, and one could vaguely see some dark green scales that had not yet fully grown. If the Gargamel of the past was said to be an old man in his twilight years, then the Gargamel at this moment was heroic and full of vitality, like a powerful middle-aged magus. Everyone could clearly see that in addition to the tiny scales on his cheeks and neck, Gargamel's slightly open eyes revealed a pair of green snake pupils. As the snake's eyes moved, a cold and ruthless aura was released, causing every magus who witnessed this scene to shiver. Gargamel's aura was still at rank 1. However, it had already risen from the original rank 1 to the peak of rank 1, and was only a step away from advancing to rank 2. It had to be known that it had only been 10 days since he received the family head's reward, and he had already shown some of the characteristics of the giant serpent bloodline. He had even jumped a small rank, which was sufficient to show that his compatibility with the giant serpent bloodline was quite high. Seeing Gargamel's arrival, Fire Dragon Witch Winley, who was also a core member of the family, was the first to greet him. The rest of the Magi did not surround them, but instead spread out to give the two core Magi space to talk. However, from the slight twitch of their ears, it could be seen that they were actually very concerned about what the two core Magi were talking about. Congratulations, Gargamel. It seems that our family will soon have another rank 2 core combat power. Winley raised her glass to Gargamel, her face full of joy and excitement. Gargamel hurriedly took a glass of wine from the waitress's tray and downed it in one gulp. He then nodded with a face full of smiles. "Thank you for your concern, Lady Winley. I'm in a good state now, and it's all thanks to the family head's grace." That's right. If there's a chance in the future, let's get closer." The two smiled insincerely as they congratulated each other, causing the two female companions to roll their eyes. The Crimson family had now split into two different branches, the North and the Scattered Forest. Not only were they in different regions, but even the North and South were different, the North and the Magus. The Crimson family Magi and the Crimson Magi's also had a different relationship. However, the Crimson Magi of the Magi of King had a more powerful, the family's family, and the Magi and the Crimson of the family. Magi had with Magi, Crimson of the Magi S of the family. Magician Butler Magi, King Dragon of Butler in, as could had it to a butler had of the Magi. Had of honest and as king. Both regions had their own advantages and disadvantages, so it was difficult to determine who was first and who was second. However, with the outbreak of the Sorcerer War, the Scattered Tower Forest branch had once again become the focus of the family's power and resources operation. It was inevitable that it would steal the limelight and glory of the Northern branch. Furthermore, following the victory of the war, the Scattered Forest of Pagoda branch was about to usher in an unprecedented wave of development, imperceptibly suppressing the momentum of the Northern branch. One could imagine that in the next 10 to 20 years, most of the Crimson family's resources and manpower would be invested in the Alobis region. This would also increase the authority and weight of the Gargamel wizard hands. Although both of them belonged to the same family, there was nothing to be picky about. But for those neutral parties who were used to seeing where the wind was blowing, investing some capital in the Gargamel faction would undoubtedly yield a higher return than Winley's faction. This was the difference. If Winley and Gargamel still had some personal friendship in the past, then at this moment, that insignificant personal friendship had become a fleeting cloud. The two of them conversed enthusiastically, but the competition in private had never stopped. Just as the two of them were chatting happily, the door of the wizard's pagoda slowly opened. The few level 3 wizards who truly represented the Crimson family's power filed out, appearing in front of the group. The one walking at the front was naturally grim, dressed in a bright red wizard robe. Compared to before, Grimm's surging fire aura had become much more reserved, and his dark red hair had turned back to black. His tall and sturdy body gave off an oppressive aura. Most of the Grade 1 and Grade 2 Magi could not help but avert their gazes when they glanced at the layer of transparent flames around his body to relieve the pain in their eyes. Grimm was like a walking volcano in human form, nearing the peak of level 3. Even though the violent and reserved fire energy had not exploded, it was enough to make any living being near him tremble from the depths of their souls. This was not fear, nor was it cowering. It was the instinctive reaction of a weak animal that had sensed an unknown danger. With Grimm's current mental pressure and the lingering flame field around him, any apprentice within 100 meters of him would be in great danger. As for the mortals, if they did not have the courage to jump into the sea of lava, it was best to hide as far away as possible. Even the official Magi could not look at him directly, and could only glance at the transparent flames around Grimm from the corner of their eyes. If they stared at the flames for too long, there was a chance that their eyes would be burned. Only the few level 2 wizards present could barely protect their eyes with spells and look directly at Grimm. However, all they could see was a ball of burning, human-shaped flames. They could not see Grimm's true appearance through the flame force field. The moment Grimm appeared, all the Magi in the molten hall stopped their conversations and social activities. They placed their hands on their chests and bowed respectfully. "Greetings, Master! Greetings, Master!" Greetings and greetings resounded throughout the hall, and anyone could sense the fervor and reverence in their voices. It could be said that the Crimson family was able to develop to its current state because of Grimm alone. Although it was said that many hands could make a big difference, what determined a Magus' power and status was still the individual strength of the powerful Magus at the center of power. Without Grimm, no matter how many rank 3 Magi the Crimson family had, they would all be defeated by the rank 4 Magus in one fell swoop. As for the rank 4 Magic Golem Dragon, without Grimm's cooperation and command, it would be very difficult for it to face Magus Declan alone. Therefore, it could be said that Grimm's existence covered up the Magic Golem Dragon's weakness of slow movement and slow attacks. Instead, it forced the rank 4 Magus to give up on his advantages and fight head-on with the Magic Golem Dragon, exchanging blows for blows. The outcome of such an exchange was naturally tragic. To be honest, the magic furnace within the Magic Golem Dragon's body continuously provided magical energy had already surpassed the comprehension and knowledge of ordinary Magi. Perhaps only in the Silver Alliance's top-notch internal database could one find a similar perpetual motion machine. Only in the hands of Grimm, who controlled the entire Goblin Plane, would he be able to make use of the huge amount of metal resources he had. Without the magic furnace, the Crimson family's resources would not be able to support such a huge army of magic weapons, and it would be impossible for them to turn these magic weapons that only existed on blueprints into reality. The Crimson family would return to its original state in an instant if they lost the large amount of combat magic machinery that could enrich the family's bottom rungs. There were less than 100 Magi in the family, and this kind of foundation could not support the framework of a rank 4 organization. If not for the large number of magic weapons and goblin mechanical warlocks replacing the Magi to charge and break through the enemy lines, the number of Magi they had would not even last 2 or 3 battles. To put it bluntly, it was the large number of magic weapons that supported the Crimson family situation and helped the Crimson family conquer this vast territory. Following closely behind Grimm were the Witch of Destiny Alice, the Blood Queen Mary, the Magic Breaker Assassin Olivia, the Plague Spirit Remy, and the Couple Arms and Ealdina. As for the elemental magic weapons and the old poisonous woman, they could only be considered as some sort of rank 3 Magi and could not be considered as official Magi of the Crimson family. Looking at the various rank 3 Magi and foreign elders that represented the future of the family, the Magi of the Crimson family were all smiles, once again feeling the bright future of the family. For the family, for the future, for our dreams. With Grimm's current level of life, There was nothing for him to say to these little fellows in front of him. After drinking 3 cups of wine in one go, Grim returned to the upper levels of the wizard's pagoda. However, Alice and Mary did not leave. Instead, they stayed behind to announce the internal rewards of the family for the outstanding performance of the Magi in this battle. Giant Serpent Bloodline Regeneration Potion, Bloodline Purification Potion, Petrifying Mask, Purifying Holy Grail, Spirit Visage, Machine Heart, Abyssal Staff, Philosopher's Stone, a string of strange and strange names. Even though they did not know the basic effects of these items, the fiery words, rank 3 items, were enough to make the Magi of the Crimson family go crazy. Other than the rank 3 items that made everyone's hearts itch, the family also took out many rank 1 and rank 2 items, covering almost all fields of wizard weapons, wizard potions, scrolls, magic wands, and wizard knowledge. They were all open for the members of the family to freely exchange for. The members of the family only needed to use the contribution points they obtained from the battle to exchange for the high-level items they had been longing for. Chapter 10:22. That bottle of giant snake bloodline regeneration potion and purification potion are mine. I must get them. The moment KB saw the name, he roared crazily. Unfortunately, Dean Ganga, who was standing beside it, was much calmer than it. Don't brag so early. I feel that you still have a chance of getting a bloodline reconstruction potion. But the bloodline purification potion, I advise you to give up on it as soon as possible. Didn't you see their expressions? Ganga's mouth twitched in anger as he pointed at Gargamel and Winley. Gargamel and Winley were both bloodline magi, so how could they complain about having too many of these high-grade purifying potions? Therefore, as soon as Madame Mary announced the list of items to be exchanged, the two of them separately gathered their subordinates and started to try their best to gather the contribution points. That's right, individual contribution points were also allowed to be traded privately. This also meant that those high-grade items that required a large amount of contribution points could not be obtained by a single person, but the points of 10 magi combined could easily be obtained in one fell swoop. However, most of the Scarlet Magi's contribution points were earned by risking their lives, and they hoped that they could be used on themselves. Moreover, they all had their own items that they fancied, so how could they be willing to give their contribution points to others? That was why even Gargamel and Winnie, who were Crimson powerhouses, mobilized a large number of subordinates and made countless favors to barely gather enough points to exchange for a grade 3 item. On the other hand, Winley had made the first move and was one step ahead of Gargamel, allowing her to successfully obtain the only bottle of bloodline purification potion. Gargamel, who was a step too late, sighed. The annoyance in his heart was simply unbearable. While he was hesitating and sighing, the giant serpent bloodline regeneration potion was exchanged for by the gnome Great Sage Cabby. Regarding this point, Dean Ganga and Dusela Gryffindor were very different. LaSalle could only shake his head and sigh. It couldn't be helped. Although they were all big shots in the gnome faction, in terms of the speed and scale of wealth accumulation, they were no match for the gnome Cabby. With the gnome business alliance in his hands, the gnome Cabby could easily extend his influence into the other gnome groups. The benefits that he could usurp from this was something that others could only dream of. After a short while, the gnome princess Vanessa obtained the machinery heart. Now, Vanessa, who controlled the magic association in secret and was the gnome princess on the surface, had built up quite a powerful force in the gnome camp. Including the gnome royal family's deep financial support, obtaining a Tier 3 item should not be a problem. Moreover, Vanessa was currently walking the path of a mechanic sorcerer. This mechanical heart taken from the Tier 3 mechanic sorceress Katie's body was perfect for her. With this mechanical heart, Vanessa's path to Tier 2 would be smooth sailing. As long as her basic data met the requirements, she would not have any problems advancing. As for whether or not she could reach Grade 3, it would depend on her personal potential, as well as the compatibility between her soul talent and this mechanical heart. Seeing the items on the list being exchanged for one by one, the Scarlet Magi, who had a clear goal, began to get anxious. They did not hold back anymore, and took out the rare resources and strange treasures they had collected from their pockets, exchanging them for contribution points in a frenzy. In an instant, the molten hall, which had been filled with people exchanging cups of wine, had turned into a small treasure convention. All sorts of strange treasures and resources appeared one after another, causing the crowd to go into a frenzy. Fountain of Regeneration, Lion's Eye, Transformation Robe, Imprisonment Bracelet, Unicorn Necklace, Boots of Evasion, Dawn Crystal, Mermaid's Tear, Dragon Marrow Stone, Resentment Grass, Haunted Tablet. Another string of rare and precious treasures appeared. Among them, there was no lack of Tier 3 items. However, the person who took them out was an unassuming Tier 1 magus. From this, it could be seen that every magus who became a magus had a tough and bizarre experience that no one knew about. Some of them were lucky enough to obtain more than the average person. If not for the fact that the exchange list was too tempting, they would have kept these items in the depths of their pockets, waiting for the right opportunity to take them out. The Fountain of Regeneration was a rare Tier 3 magus material, and it was also a core material for many high-ranked life extension rituals. Hence, the moment it appeared, it was fought over by the crowd. On the surface, the transformation robe was only a Tier 1 defensive equipment, but could grant the wearer a miraculous transformation ability. It was also one of the best treasures for exploring the jungle and traversing the Black Forest. The unicorn necklace could increase the wearer's mental resistance, preventing mental spells such as bewitchment and mental suggestion from interfering with the brain. It was a Tier 2 item. The haunted tablet was also a Tier 2 item. The wearer would have the strange ability to look directly at spirit-type creatures. In addition, the haunted tablet could also be used as a carrier for high-ranked spirits. It was a support tool for raising spirits, resentment spirits, and other creatures. Apart from the many magi, a few of the Scarlet family's external helpers also joined in on the treasure hunt. Draconian Zacha used the large number of contribution points he had accumulated over the years to obtain the Tier 3 defensive equipment, the Spirit Visage. He was originally walking the path of a berserker warrior. After obtaining the Lightning Spear and Frost Hammer, he lacked a high-quality defensive equipment. Spirit Visage, plus 5 Vitality, plus 2 Strength, plus 55 basic magic resistance, plus 100% basic health recovery, and an additional 800 degrees of physical defense. It also came with a skill, Spirit, which allowed the wearer's basic recovery to reach 600% for a short period of time. With this Spirit Visage, Draconian Zacha really became a cockroach that could not be killed. Even when facing a Tier 3 enemy, he could rely on his strong physique and the powerful defense of the armor to withstand 2 to 3 rounds of attacks from the opponent. If he activated Spirit, he would be almost unkillable for the duration of the skill's duration. In a bloody battlefield where every second counted, this was a rare life-saving skill. As for the other low-profile rich man, the clone Brain Grew, he also obtained the Abyssal Scepter after some careful consideration. With this item, he could summon some abyssal monsters or demons every now and then. It would also be a good toy. As for the couple Arms and Aeldina, they became collectors of all kinds of treasures. The couple added their contribution points together and successfully obtained the Tier 3 Holy Grail of Purification. This was a Tier 3 sacred equipment that Grimm had snatched from a holy knight. It had the powerful ability to cleanse darkness and dispel evil. It could be said that this trip to Invict Plain had made Grimm's pockets full. He consecutively swept through 2 or 3 Holy Knight strongholds and killed 400 wizards in one go. The number of strange treasures he collected from their storage rings was even more shocking. The things he took out as reward from his family were things that he had no use for, or that he was not interested in. The truly good things were carefully stored away by him. As a meeting gift, Grimm also gave Alice a Book of Arcana. This was a strange spell book that could only be obtained by spellcasters who had mastered prophecy spells. Every day, one divination spell would be sacrificed to this book in exchange for a random minor spell. Of course, most of the spells were low-level spells that were useless, but sometimes strange spells and incantations that had never been seen before might appear. In short, if one wanted to obtain something good from the Book of Arcana, apart from perseverance, one needed extraordinary luck. From Grimm's point of view, Alice's luck had always been good. Grimm gave Mary a tier 3 short dagger, but he could not favor one over the other. Bee Sting, +4 agility, +1 constitution, +1 spirit, +40% attack speed, magic penetration, and tear effects. Additional skill, Condensed Strike, able to condense all of the user's strength into a single point, bringing extreme pain to the enemy. After Mary became a tier 3 vampire wizard, she had chosen the path of an agile assassin. But most of the time, in order to deal as much damage as possible to her enemies, she preferred to trade blow for blow and become a berserk assassin. With this tier 3 Bee Sting wizard weapon, she now had a way to deal with those that she could not defeat in the past, making it much easier to deal with them. While Mary and Alice stayed in the Molten Hall to host the exchange, Grimm had long since returned to the upper levels of the Wizard's Pagoda to inspect the top-grade treasures he had brought back from another world. Ever since he had absorbed the Holy Light Souls, Grimm's spiritual force had increased to 27 points. This time, he had brought back a Spirit Congregation crystal, and the number of Holy Light Souls it contained far exceeded the previous one. Among them, there were as many as 4 of them that belonged to level 3 Holy Knights. It cannot be helped. At the end of the battle in the poisonous swamp, these stubborn Golden Knights had all fought with the attitude of dying together with the enemy. Hence, it was difficult to control the rhythm of the battle, and the souls of the 3 Golden Knights had dissipated. However, the AI chip had already calculated that the Holy Light Souls in the Spirit Congregation crystal were enough to push Grimm's spiritual force to the limit of 39 points. Now that he had reached level 4, there was no longer much meaning in returning to absorb these Holy Light Souls. Back in the Invicta Dimension, Grimm had spent 5 years to absorb the Holy Light Souls of a level 3 Golden Knight. Now that there were 4 of them stored here, the difficulty of absorbing them was obvious. However, Grimm did not care about such a difficult problem. Chapter 1023, Blazing Flame Monarch, 5th level. Within a tightly guarded secret room, Grimm was standing in front of an alchemy experiment table, silently examining the remains of an astral beast in front of him. The corpse was sealed in a translucent amber, a strange species that was completely different from the creatures of this plane. Its appearance was difficult to describe. At least, Grimm had never seen anything similar to it in the plane before. In short, this astral beast was like a lump of messy, rotting flesh. It didn't have limbs or anything like that, nor did it have a set skeleton. It didn't even have flesh or organs. Its entire body was covered in a dark, hard layer of skin that flickered with a crystalline luster. Strictly speaking, this should be the infant body of an astral beast. The fact that an astral beast's infant had the strength of a grade 2 astral beast spoke volumes about how dangerous and terrifying the outer realms were. Astral beasts were just a general term. Any creature that could roam and survive in the endless sea of stars could be called astral beasts. The difference between astral beasts was like the difference between heaven and earth, and they could not be mentioned in the same breath. Some astral beasts were as small as mastiffs, while others were as large as mountains. There were even some astral beasts that were as large as a continent. Their individual strength was directly related to their size, but what was even more terrifying was the chaotic energy they possessed. It had to be known that the elemental energy in a plane was orderly, and it was gentle and tame. The greatest contribution to this was due to the laws of the plane. Outside the plane was a terrifying, boundless sea of stars. The sea of stars rippled with boundless, berserk magical energy, also known as chaotic energy. This magical energy was chaotic, berserk, and disorderly. It was extremely harmful to most creatures in the plane. Through the planar barrier, which was also known as the world barrier, the plane isolated its internal space from the sea of stars outside. This protected all life and matter within the plane. Through the world barrier, the plane's laws broke down the chaotic energy that seeped into basic elements such as earth, fire, water, and wind that creatures could absorb. They were then used to construct the basic elemental environment of the plane. Hence, the creatures living in the plane of existence were actually protected by the plane of existence, and the energy they absorbed was tamed and filtered peaceful, magical energy. Although he could increase the power of his spells by using the chaotic energy was no less than a fatal poison to most creatures of the plane. Once the chaotic energy invaded the body, it would break the elemental balance that the body had built over a long period of time, leading to the collapse of the energy circulation system. With the fragile bodies of human sorcerers, there was no way they could withstand the collapse of this system. Therefore, for low-ranked magi to step out of the plane and travel through the sea of stars was simply courting death. Only after advancing to the advanced level and possessing a strong body and the means to deal with the chaotic energy would they be qualified to roam the sea of stars and search for the mysterious worlds hidden behind the endless void storms. The sea of stars was violent and dangerous, but there were still many native species. They were born to adapt to the existence of energy tides and could directly absorb chaotic energy for their own use. That was why they were called star beasts. One of the things that star beasts loved to do the most was to travel through the endless sea of stars in search of planes and worlds that they could invade. Once they found a target, they would tear open the plane's barrier, barge in, and feast on it. Furthermore, the void chaos energy they brought with them would cause irreparable damage to the plane world. Hence, in the history of the plane's development, there were countless planes that were damaged and withered due to the rampage of the star beasts. When the plane of existence's laws were destroyed and the plane's consciousness was heavily damaged, the plane would lose the ability to mend the barrier. The endless energy storms would sweep away all fragile matter and life, killing almost 90% of the intelligent life forms in the plane. Only the truly powerful life forms or species could escape this broken world and become nomads of the endless sea of stars or find a new world to stay in. From this point of view, all star beasts were the mortal enemies of the plane's creatures. So long as both sides were to encounter each other, it would definitely be a life and death struggle. The remains of the young star beasts in front of him were very likely spoils of war obtained by the magi who had hunted them in the outer realm. It could be said that every star beast corpse was a huge treasure trove of resources. The skin of the star beasts could be used to make top-grade anti-magic equipment, and the flesh of star beasts was also the favorite of body-tempering magi. The most valuable part of the star beasts was their natural chaotic constitution, which was also a top-grade bloodline. There were too many ancient magi who desired the chaotic constitution of the star beasts. They either ate their flesh, injected their blood, or refined their bloodline power. In short, the magi thought of all kinds of methods to transform themselves into the strange constitution that was not afraid of the chaotic energy of the endless sea of stars. Unfortunately, there were too few who succeeded. Although there were some great magi who succeeded in transforming into chaotic constitutions, some of the side effects were too great. Compared to the creatures of the plane, the star beasts were much more powerful and violent. However, they mostly relied on their instincts to survive. Their bodies were extremely tough, and they all had powerful special abilities. However, they had obvious flaws in their brains and intelligence. Those who used brute force to transform into chaotic constitutions had their intelligence degenerated, and they all became cruel and evil creatures that were no different from star beasts. The secret laboratory they had opened up in the outer realm was abandoned, and became a place for the magi to explore, adventure, and travel in groups. Ordinary bloodline refinement methods were almost useless on star beasts. Therefore, even the three great magi organizations' research on the star beast bloodline was top secret, and they would not leak it easily. However, according to some unreliable rumors, the Magus Association was ahead of everyone in terms of bloodline research, and seemed to have succeeded in transforming a batch of chaotic magi. However, Such a trump card obviously could not be announced to the public easily. Therefore, apart from some rumors in the outside world, there were no traces of these chaotic magi. Although Grimm had source siphoning bugs, he did not know if they could be used on the star beasts. Moreover, he could not use the only star beast corpse for his source siphoning experiment. Thus, he had locked himself up in this secret biological laboratory. On one hand, he was thinking of ways to extract the star beast's flesh and blood for preliminary experiments. And on the other hand, he was adjusting and breeding new source siphoning bugs based on the results of the preliminary experiments. This kind of work had always been long and required a lot of time and resources. If Grimm was alone, he would have to run around the Magus world to find and gather all kinds of necessary experimental materials and resources. But now, with the Crimson family's flourishing platform, he only needed to give the order, and there would naturally be thousands of magi, apprentices, and gnomes searching for what he needed. This way, he could free up all his time and energy to focus on his own wizard technique experiments, and did not have to worry about the family's trifling matters. Moreover, the Crimson family was currently in a period of rapid development and expansion. There were many things that did not require Grimm's presence. As long as the Crimson Magi knew that the legendary fire wizard they worshipped and admired the most was still in their wizard's pagoda, they would naturally have an endless supply of energy and would be able to do things with ease. Grimm was like the backbone of the Crimson family. As long as he was in the family, even if he did not do anything, he would be able to give the family members an irreplaceable guarantee of confidence. After all, it was widely spread throughout the scattered towers that the legendary fire wizard, Grimm, had been listed by the elders of the various families and factions as a level 3 magus with the highest chance of advancing to level 4. Under the influence of such huge expectations, any magi or organization that dared to oppose the Crimson family had basically lost their minds. They were so stupid that they did not deserve to be called intelligent magi, who knew how to seek benefits and avoid harm. The Fabris magi who had returned to the family's territory also silently admitted their defeat. In order to redeem the family's magi and elite troops that had been captured, the Fabris family had no choice but to fork out a sky-high price in compensation, and only then did they resolve the differences and hatred between the two sides. 21 million magic crystals, a sea of wizard technique ingredients and magi resources, all the Crimson nobles that had defected to the Fabris family, dozens of Crimson cities, hundreds of castles and manors, up to 100,000 slaves from another world, a large number of low-grade wizard equipment, scrolls, potions, magic wands, and other alchemy items. With this amount of compensation, the Crimson family would be able to rebuild the entire Elobes region, turning it into a secular family, territory that belonged solely to them. The old noble territories and human countries had also been invaded and riddled with holes. It was a good opportunity to merge them together and create a large unified human country. The Crimson Dynasty. This human country that was built to rely on the Crimson family was called the Crimson Dynasty. The king that was elected to the throne was called Badhorn. The Crimson family was the only distant relative that Magus Gargamel had dug out from his hometown. The human nobles that had performed outstandingly in the previous Magus family war and were able to stay in the Crimson faction were promoted one after another. Even Earl Thomas had now become a Grand Duke, possessing a vast territory that spanned thousands of square kilometers. None of the Crimson Magi were alone. They all had large or small families behind them that they needed to take care of and support. Now that they had a large country to settle down in, they happily brought their families and clansmen over, becoming nobles of the Crimson Dynasty that had hereditary territories. Chapter 10:24. On the 5th day after Grimm's return to the Sorcerer World, Alice successfully advanced to Grade 3 and became an advanced sorcerer. In the bet with the first Witch of Fate, Medusa, Alice had won completely and completely, so she naturally obtained a huge amount of fate power. Assisting the Crimson family in defeating the even more powerful Fabris family had allowed her to gain a preliminary understanding of the Magus world's development and strength. Thus, It was not surprising that she had such progress. This improvement allowed her to surpass Mary and Olena, becoming the second most powerful person in the Crimson family, second only to Grimm. However, after obtaining a large amount of high-quality blood from Grimm, as long as Mary could absorb and fuse it into her own strength, it would be easy for her to level up by 1 or 2 ranks. Therefore, it was hard to predict who would become the second in command of the Crimson family. While the 3 heads of the Crimson Magi were chasing after each other to increase their strength, most of the Crimson Magi were also trying their best to catch up with their families. After defeating the Fabris family and monopolizing the Alobes region for more than 10 years, the Scarlet Magi began to step into the ranks of Rank 2 Magi under the guidance of a large amount of Magi resources. Originally, there were only a handful of Tier 2 sorcerers, but now they had developed into a frighteningly powerful team. Peak Tier 2, Blood Knight Soros High Grade 2, Dragonman Zacha, Goblin Tiggerly, Goblin Ripper, Cloning Brain Jellu, Bug Lich Bliss Intermediate Tier 2, Blood Knight Winsow, Blood Elf Mage Isa, Blood Elf Magic Archer Leia, Blood Elf Shapeshifter Spara, Berserk Witch Sophia Primary Grade 2, Fire Dragon Witch Winlier, Poison Witch Gargamel, Demonis Amelia, Old Fox Venlier, Violent Blood Group Leader Decilla, LaSalle, the Snake Goblin Cabbie, the Goblin Magician Loke, the Goblin Leader Gonger, the Mechanical Princess Vanessa, the Ice Maiden Chef. Originally, Old Fox Venlier didn't have the qualifications to be ranked in the 2nd tier. However, considering that he had served the family for a long period of time, it could be said that he had given his all for the family's development. Thus, Mary used her authority as a blood master to promote him to a Grade 2 vampire. At the same time, Soros, the Tier 2 Blood Knight, was also promoted. He was talented to begin with, and was considered the most perfect individual among all the vampires who had the most autonomous consciousness and vampire bloodline. In order to have a capable subordinate by her side, Mary had expended a lot of her origin blood, and only then was he promoted from Peak Grade 2 to Primary Grade 3. For this reason, Mary had no choice but to sleep for half a year. As for those below Grade 2, the Crimson family was filled with talents. The older generation of Wind Wizard Decilla, Medusa, Sharon, and others had all reached the Tier 1 Advanced or Tier 1 peak. They were also getting closer and closer to Tier 2. There were also new faces among the Tier 1 sorcerers. In this group of more than 120 people, 10% of them were vampires, 20% were goblin magic machinists, and the rest were human sorcerers. Of course, within the Crimson family, other than the official Magi, there were also more than 270 no-mechanical warlocks. Although they did not have the long lifespan and extensive knowledge of sorcery like official sorcerers, they were no weaker than ordinary Tier 1 sorcerers in terms of combat power. Therefore, in order to treat them equally, the Crimson family gave them the status and treatment of official sorcerers. Other than the no-mechanical warlocks, the Crimson family also had a group of people with a special status, the demonized gnomes. There were about 70 to 90 of them, and they were all gnome engineers or technicians who worked for the Golden Dragon all year round. They had been contaminated by the magic energy leaked by the Golem Dragon for a long period of time. Although they were not considered a special branch or race of gnomes, they were fundamentally different from ordinary gnomes. Compared to ordinary gnomes, their temperament was more violent, their physique was thicker, and their strength was greater. There were even some visible mageweds on the surface of their dark green bodies. These mageweds gave them a special effect similar to the Berserk spell. If it was a fair fight, a demonized gnome could easily kill 3 to 5 ordinary gnomes. Given time, this group of demonized gnomes might really be able to separate from the gnome camp and become a special type of demonized creature. Sorcerer Calendar, 7th of June, Year 32902. Gargamel walked alone in the wide and spacious passageway. The star illumination stones embedded on both sides of the passageway lit up one after another, illuminating the small area he was in. Finally, he reached the end of the long passageway, and the familiar molten hall appeared in front of him. At the entrance of the molten hall, two abnormally large metal magical machines walked out of the cave with heavy footsteps, staring at Gargamel with their strange beehive-shaped compound eyes. The beehive-shaped eye sockets flickered with various colors, as if confirming Gargamel's identity. "Welcome, Sir Gargamel, to the Blazing Flame Monarch. Lord Grimm has asked you to wait at the 3rd level of the Wizard's Pagoda. He'll come down to see you after he finishes his experiments." The large metal magical machine spoke in a strange metallic voice, then retreated back into the cave and stood motionless. A team of slightly smaller battle magical machines brought Gargamel through the molten hall. They formed a neat escort formation and escorted Gargamel to the entrance of the Blazing Flame Monarch's Wizard's Pagoda before turning around and returning. Waiting for him, there were 2 enchanting and sexy abyssal succubi. Ever since Grimm had returned from the otherworld and defeated a level 4 body-tempering wizard, the Crimson family had entered a period of rapid expansion. Even though the Blazing Flame Monarch's Wizard's Pagoda was good, it was still a small Wizard's Pagoda and could not accommodate the expansion of the Crimson family's members. Thus, under the instructions of the family leader, the Crimson family built a large Wizard's Pagoda in the core region of Alobes and moved all of the family members there. The Crimson Origin Flame Monarch's Wizard's Pagoda became the family leader Grimm's personal space and was no longer open to the public. The daily affairs of the family were mostly handled by Gargamel and Winley. Matters which could not be decided at the moment were referred to Lady Mary or Lady Alice for their advice. Only those extremely important matters that concerned the future of the Crimson family would be returned to the Blazing Flame Monarch to personally meet the family leader and let him make the final decision. The reason why Gargamel had rushed here today was because of an important matter that concerned a level 4 wizard. Otherwise, he would not have dared to disturb the family leader's training so easily. Hee. So it's such a young and handsome man. I'm very happy to be able to serve you. One of the 2 succubi's eyes twinkled as she smiled charmingly at Gargamel, looking like a young girl who admired him wholeheartedly. Gargamel had consumed 2 bloodline purification potions in a row over the years, and his giant serpent bloodline had become increasingly pure. At this moment, he no longer looked like a human wizard. Instead, he looked like a powerful bloodline wizard with the head of a giant serpent. If he took off his wizard robe, outsiders would be shocked to find that Gargamel's entire body was covered in dark green snake scales. The scales were smooth and glossy, but they flickered with a rich magical aura. They could defend against the attacks of level 1 magical weapons, and they also had powerful magical resistance. His hands and feet had deteriorated to varying degrees, like 2 tree branches that had lost the nourishment of their main trunk. They withered and withered, and from afar, they looked like shriveled chicken claws. However, the surging giant serpent bloodline in his body made him seem full of vitality. A pair of dark green serpent pupils radiated an evil and cruel aura as they blinked. The current Gargamel's strength had already risen to the level of high grade 2. Facing these 2 little succubi who were only at the level of level 1, he was as terrifying as a demon god that could destroy the world. Looking at the other party trying to show off his natural charm, Gargamel hissed and said in a low voice, "Little guy, as long as you don't worry that I'll swallow you when I'm hungry, you can come find me tonight." Kakik. There was no need for him to pretend to be a demon. Just his terrifying appearance and the cold aura that lingered around him was enough to scare the little succubus so much that her face turned pale and she no longer dared to test him. The other succubus had clearly been here for a longer time and understood the rules here. She only softly said, "Sir Gargamel, Master is still busy in the laboratory. You can wait in the hall on the 3rd floor. Please come with me." After saying this, she swayed her slender waist and led Gargamel to the floating stone plate at the corner of the hall that led to the 3rd floor. The floating stone plate was made from red ochre produced in the Eisenstein region. Even though it had not been enchanted, its surface was naturally covered in layers of strange magical veins. The 3 of them stepped onto the floating stone plate. They did not know where the succubus touched, but under the infusion of powerful magical energy, The red ochre floating stone plate beneath their feet became translucent, its entire body shimmering with a faint magical radiance. The floating stone plate rose steadily, carrying the three of them slowly up the wizard's pagoda. As they passed by the second floor of the wizard's pagoda, Gargamel's eyes suddenly lit up. This place had undergone an earth-shattering transformation. Translucent magical barriers had divided the large space within the wizard's pagoda into a dozen large living areas. Strange creatures with extremely strange appearances lived or were kept in captivity in each area, and the environments they lived in were all different. There was a dry and hot desert, a snowfield covered in ice and snow, a lava volcano with raging flames, a dark and damp magic swamp. Every environment was different, but they were big and small, showing the extravagance of the builder and the powerful and profound magic attainments. The power of the master of the family had increased again. Chapter 1025. Gargamel waited in the blazing flame monarch for 2 whole days before he was able to meet Grimm. Grimm's body was currently enveloped in a layer of formless flames, as if his entire body was burning fiercely. Although he had tried his best to restrain the overflowing flames, the moment Grimm stepped into the guest room, the temperature in the room began to rise rapidly. If Gargamel was still the little rank 1 magus from before, he would have been half-cooked by now. Even after transforming into a giant serpent bloodline and gaining a powerful physique and extraordinary magic resistance, Gargamel still felt extremely uncomfortable in this scorching environment that was akin to lava and volcanoes. However, under the gaze of the family head's burning eyes, Gargamel's body that was covered in fine snake scales began to emit green smoke. My apologies. My spiritual force has increased a little too quickly recently, so my control over the flames has decreased. Seeing that his gaze was about to ignite Gargamel's body, Grimm could only helplessly turn his head to a place where there was no one around. Not a single item made of wood or metal could be seen in the hall. Even the tables and chairs were made of obsidian, which was extremely resistant to fire. Spiritual force increased too quickly. His control over the flames had decreased. This was the first time Gargamel had heard such a complaint ever since he became a magus. As a magus, there had always been those who complained that their spiritual force increased too slowly, but there had never been anyone who complained that their spiritual force increased too quickly. Perhaps this was what made the family head different from the rest. Gargamel grimaced as he thought to himself, "Did something big happen in the family that requires you to come all the way here? I remember that everything was peaceful the last time I contacted you." Grimm said lazily, as if he had lost interest in anything other than witchcraft. "My lord, the last time we contacted each other was a year ago." Gargamel smiled helplessly. "A year? Time really flies." Grimm muttered, "All right, tell me why you're here." "Yes, my lord." Gargamel hesitated for a moment. "Chairman Frid of the Scattered Tower Forest Association wishes to see you." "Who?" "Frid, the chairman. Why does he want to see me?" Gargamel hurriedly bowed and explained, "My lord, the reason why we were able to pacify the Alovis region so quickly last time was because of President Fred's help. Since he expressed his intentions to us through the Gnome Commerce Alliance, it's possible. Very likely what? It's very likely that they're trying to force you to make a choice between the Scattered Tower Forest and the Northlands?" "Yes, Lord Patriarch." The old fellows in the Scattered Tower Forest have always been very vigilant and cautious towards the infiltration of the 3 major forces, and the relationship between the Crimson family and the Destiny Witches cannot be hidden. So, they want to meet me and measure my worth, and then pull me into their little circle. "Yes, Lord Patriarch. From the information we've obtained so far, this might be the only explanation. In that case, the benefits they gave us before were just bait. When we swallow the entire Alovis region, it's the same as swallowing the bait. With such a big piece of meat, they're certain that we won't be willing to give it up. So they chose this time to force us to lay our cards on the table." Grimm analyzed calmly but the layer of invisible flames around his body did not seem to be calm. The temperature in the room rose again. Gargamel licked his chapped lips and lowered his head, not saying another word. For matters that could affect the future of the family, he was only responsible for providing the information he knew. As for what the Lord Patriarch would choose, it was not something he could interfere with. When Magi stood at different heights, their perspectives and thoughts on the same problem would be vastly different. Hence, Gargamel did not dare to use his shallow views to influence the Lord Patriarch's decision. In any case, he just had to follow the Lord Patriarch's footsteps. After a quarter of an hour, Grimm spoke again. Go and reply to them. I agree to meet with President Fred, and they will arrange the meeting location. However, the time has to be half a year later. With my current condition, it's not suitable for me to go out. Yes. Gargamel did not hesitate to accept the order and left. When the reception hall regained its peace, a hazy figure of a woman suddenly appeared beside Grimm. You've decided? Alice's gentle and calm voice came from the figure. Yes, this is actually good. Although the North seems peaceful on the surface, it's actually extremely xenophobic. The development of the family here has always been restricted by the witch faction. It's better to go to the scattered forest of towers. It's not a monolithic block there, and it's suitable for the rapid rise of new families. Right, those old fellows won't come up with some dirty tricks to deal with me, right? Alice could not help but be speechless. What are you thinking? Not only will there be no harm in going, but there will also be some unexpected benefits. However, these benefits are not easy to obtain, so you have to think about it carefully. Benefits? All right, you don't have to ask anymore. You know, prophecies can't be spoken so easily. Otherwise, there will be some unpredictable changes in fate. Grimm silently nodded. After working with Alice for such a long time, he did have a certain degree of understanding of fate. The last time he went to Invic Plain, it was because Alice told Grimm some things in advance that his journey to the other world became full of ups and downs. He almost died there and was almost lost forever. Fate was always unknown and unpredictable. Even the witches of fate, who were the masters of fate, could not completely make fate move according to the path they had set. Just like the number of pieces of cheese in a wooden bowl, Alice might be able to use her fate perception to know the exact number before opening the bowl. But once Alice used this exact result to influence the people or things in fate, the originally certain things would also have some unexpected changes. For example, a cat accidentally broke in and knocked over the wooden bowl, or the cheese was stolen by a mouse, or the temperature was too high and the cheese melted. There were too many accidents, too many unforeseen events, and any one of them could affect the originally certain outcome. This was the root cause of most of the masters of fate being so taciturn. There were often powerful people who mocked the masters of fate, calling them useless bystanders. Many times, even if they saw through fate, they were trapped by the rules of fate and could not roam freely. It was as if they were playing five-card with the heavens every day. Even if they won for a lifetime, a single loss might cause them to never be able to reincarnate. Those who were more intelligent kept their mouths shut and did not interfere with the flow of the river of fate, which was why they could barely keep their heads above water. As for those who were too active or overestimated themselves, they would sooner or later be devoured by fate, and their souls would be destroyed. Grimm obviously understood this, so he never forced Alice to challenge the rules of fate, nor did he have delusions of using the power of fate to gain any benefits. And this was one of the main reasons why Alice could continue to be so powerful. After a few simple words of communication, the shadow projected by Alice slowly dissipated. Grimm also returned to the laboratory on the 5th level of the Wizard's Pagoda in a flash of flames. In a corner of the hall, a tall and mighty elemental magic machine stood quietly, its perfect lines made of super alloy flickering with a dull blue luster. After a long period of repair, the damage the elemental magic machine had suffered in the Invic dimension had slowly healed. Grimm had even used some magic memory metals that he had just refined in the process of repairing it. The Gnome Research Institute set up in the Northern White Tower had finally produced some decent products after spending a large number of magic crystals and a large number of resources. The magical memory metal was one of them. This special magical memory metal, which could only be purified by the alchemy laboratory, had a strange memory function. Once the magical memory metal was molded with a special method, it would be able to remember its shape. Even if China was pierced, cut, torn apart, or deformed in battle, it would be able to reform under the stimulation of sufficient energy and return to its original form. With this magical memory metal and the small magic furnace inside the elemental magic machine, Grimm did not have to worry about damage when he used it to fight in another world. As long as it was given enough time and the magic furnace was not destroyed, it would be able to return to its peak battle form. Hence, once the Gnome Research Institute produced this result, Grimm used his authority to upgrade the elemental magic machine. As for the golem dragon, oh my god, it's such a huge metal mountain, and it's impossible to transform it into such an expensive magic memory metal. It's simply burning magic crystals like crazy. Hence, Grimm only approved the replacement of some of the core components with this special magical memory metal. Otherwise, even if he really had a magic crystal mountain, it would be burnt to ashes by the gnomes. With the current manpower and funds of the Gnome Research Institute, they could only produce 5 kilograms of magical memory metal every day, which cost around 1,700 magic crystals. After ensuring that the family would use it first, they could sell about 10 kilograms of magical memory metal every month. They sold it at a price of 20 magic crystals per gram. Grimm had been hiding in the blazing flame monarch all these years, secretly absorbing the holy light souls. His spiritual force had also begun to rise rapidly. Even so, it took him 15 years to raise his spiritual force from 37 points to 39 points. He was only a step away from his peak state. The rapid increase in his spiritual force also caused his control over his body to decrease. Therefore, he gave himself half a year of buffer time to stabilize his unstable mental state. Chapter 1026. Half a year later, a small floating ship stopped above the blazing flame monarch for a short period of time and left after half an hour. Inside the cabin, Grimm was chatting with a middle-aged magus in a white robe. The one who came to receive him was someone he knew. Lauren, the leader of the disciplinary department of the Scattered Tower Forest Association and a rank 3 magus. You haven't been to Cothran Castle since you became a magus, right? Compared to the last time, Lauren was full of smiles. His attitude was amiable, like a friendly elder who had not seen him in a long time. However, Grimm knew that as the leader of the disciplinary department, Lauren's hands were definitely stained with the blood of magi. How could he be as easy to talk to as his appearance suggested? Moreover, the first time the two of them met in Rain City, they didn't have a very pleasant time. Therefore, the other party's attitude was likely to be a factor to ease their relationship. In return, a warm smile appeared on Grimm's face. That's right. After becoming a magus, I've either been busy gathering knowledge or searching for resources. Let's not even talk about the 3 great powers. I haven't even been to more than half of the Scattered Tower Forest. What a pity. Then when you come to Cothran Castle, you should take a good look around. That place produces the best magic wands and magic servants. If Lord Grimm doesn't mind, I can personally accompany you to take a look. If what Wizard Lorien said just now was just a polite greeting, then what Wizard Lorien said now was a bit like trying to suck up to Abel. Although he did not know why Lauren would lower himself to such an extent, Grimm still wanted to express his gratitude. As if sensing Grimm's gentleness, Lauren approached him and laughed. Lord Grimm, you will meet some old friends in Cothran Castle this time. You should be mentally prepared. After saying this, he did not dwell on the topic. Instead, he talked about some interesting things that had happened in the Scattered Tower Forest. While casually responding to Wizard Lauren, who was acting friendly, Grimm silently pondered over the words old friends. At their level, the word friend could no longer be used against wizards below grade 3. This meant that Lauren was hinting that Grimm might meet a familiar rank 3 magus in Cothran Castle. Who could it be? The AI. Chip quickly filtered through all the rank 3 magi it knew, and in the end, it only projected one image. It was a purple mist so dense that it was impossible to see through it. It was her, Fort Coslin. Cothran Castle was located in the middle of the scattered tower forest. It did not belong to any sorcerer family or organization, but was an almost completely independent neutral area. This was because the headquarters of the Scattered Pagoda Forest Association was located here. With Coslin Castle as the center, the land within a radius of 1,000 miles was the private property of the association. It was jointly controlled by 14-tier force sorcerers in the Scattered Talon region. It had a completely independent sorcerer team and training system. It was the only joint force in the Scattered Talon region that had the power to supervise, enforce, and punish. When the airship slowly landed at a mooring point near Fort Coslin, a large group of people in colorful magus robes were already waiting there. Grim, accompanied by Wizard Lauren, slowly walked down the wooden deck of the ship. "Boss, you're finally back. This must be the famous legendary fire magus, Lord Grim." The first to greet them was a tall and sturdy man. His face was full of muscles, and his head was slightly bald. His voice was loud and clear, giving off a strange feeling that his body was filled with extreme explosive power. Come, let me introduce you. This is my assistant, Tito, a rank 3 body-tempering magus. Tito, this is the Lord Grim that you've been talking about for a long time. Lauren introduced them with a face full of smiles. For some reason, when he mentioned Grim's identity as a rank 3 body-tempering magus, he emphasized his words, as if reminding Leyland of something. All these years, thanks to Lord Grim, all the body-tempering magi have been holding their breaths. Why, today is the first time we've met. Let's shake hands. The barbarian Tito welcomed them, and even took the initiative to extend his thick, bony right hand, smiling coldly with an unfriendly expression. Among the magi community, there was no such etiquette as touching hands. There were all sorts of strange spells, and who knew if the magi he'd met had curses or poisons that could be cast through physical contact. Hence, most magi would place their hands on their chests as a form of greeting, and rarely would they touch the bodies of others. The fact that Grim was doing this meant that he wanted to have a duel. The surrounding magi all had smiles on their faces, as if they were waiting for the result of the duel between the two. Grim was slightly stunned, looking at the rough skin of his opponent, and the joints of his hand were as thick as iron pincers. With his elemental vision, he could even see a frightening amount of magic energy converging on his opponent's right hand. Letting an elemental magus like him compete with a body-tempering magus in terms of strength, it seemed like this was arranged by his opponent to show his strength. Grim smiled indifferently, and, as if he did not feel anything, he extended his right hand and shook it tightly. Grim's base strength was already 20 points, and with the 5 points from Sodden's Divine Ring and the 2 points from his Blazing Equipment set, his individual strength was as high as 27 points. This level of strength might not be enough to fight a rank 3 body-tempering magus head-on, but should not be a problem for him to shake hands. Furthermore, as a rank 3 fire magus, Grim's flame force field was not something an ordinary person could withstand. Hence, when Grim and Tito shook hands, both of their expressions turned ugly. It was as if his right hand had been placed in a blender, and a terrifying, violent force easily crushed Grim's insignificant 27 points of strength. In the next half a minute, this huge force was like a constantly churning lathe, constantly crushing and destroying Grim's fragile fingers and flesh. Even without using the AI chip to scan his hand, Grim could tell from the intense pain that more than half of the bones in his hand were covered in cracks, and the flesh and tendons that acted as a buffer had been crushed into an unrecognizable puddle of blood. What was rare was that even with such a huge force, the skin on Grim's right hand was not damaged in the slightest. Although there seemed to be no abnormalities on the outside, the inside was already distorted beyond recognition. However, Grim was not one to take a beating without retaliating. The invisible layer of flame force field covering the surface of his right hand had risen to a shocking level. While his opponent was crushing him with strength, Grim's flame force field had already penetrated his opponent's skin, roasting the flesh on his right hand in a way that no one could have imagined. Of course, in order to maintain the appearance of courtesy, Grim did not harm his opponent's right hand in the slightest. However, the flesh, shackles, and blood vessels below the skin were rapidly turning red under the extremely high temperature, before turning purplish-black. Both of them held their right hands tightly, and both of them had cheerful smiles on their faces. However, one side's right hand faintly emitted strange cracking sounds, while the other's right hand was rapidly turning black, and a faint roasted meat aroma wafted out. Both of them were bitterly holding on, but they still had to maintain a friendly facade. Their expressions gradually became strange and distorted. All right. Don't be so enthusiastic the moment we meet. I still want to show Lord Grim around the castle. You can stop here. Laurian, who had been watching the battle from the side, finally stepped forward to mediate. After all, Grim was a guest invited by the association, so it was not a problem for him to put on a show of strength without hurting his feelings. However, if he crushed his opponent's right hand the moment they met, it would make the association seem too harsh. Both of them smiled awkwardly and let go of each other's right hand. Grim put his right hand back into his robes without anyone noticing, then turned around and nodded at the few grade 3 magi around him. How's the strength of this fire magus? Laurian secretly transmitted his voice to Tito. His strength is 27 points, which is very high among elemental magi. I've already crippled his right hand. He won't be able to recover it without 3 to 5 days of hard work. Good lad, not bad, but my right hand is crippled too. Ugh, that guy's flames are very domineering. They've already roasted the flesh and bones in my right hand. All right then, you go and treat your wounds first. I'll receive him myself. Naturally, the scene that had taken place at the fan meeting would not spread. It would only spread to a certain small circle of the association's upper echelons. According to Tito's evaluation, this legendary fire magus had 27 points in strength and 24 points in vitality. These figures were undoubtedly a little too high for an elemental magus. After all, elemental magi relied on their mental force to survive. Spending a lot of time on vitality and strength was undoubtedly a huge waste of resources. Usually, a grade 3 elemental magus with at least 10 points in strength and vitality would be enough to deal with most battles and harsh environments. Only the top-notch magi nurtured by large organizations, who did not lack resources and had a reasonable training system, could push their other attributes to such a high level. Someone like Grim, who was clearly an elemental magus, had a powerful physique and magical abilities that did not lose out to bloodline magi. It was no wonder that he could withstand the berserk combat power of a grade 4 magus and exhaust his stamina. Of course, the biggest contributor to this was the grade 4 magical golem dragon. However, if Grim did not have the support of such a monstrous vitality, it would have been almost impossible for him to achieve this. Chapter 1027. Cothran Castle was a castle in name, but in reality, it was a huge living area that spanned thousands of kilometers. Beautiful manors and exquisite villas could be seen everywhere in the periphery. Passing by, one could see some farmers in sackcloth busily working in the fields with their heads lowered, and the coachman driving the wagons loaded with harvests could also be seen smiling blissfully and peacefully. This was a land that had not experienced war for thousands of years. Any wizard family would stay away from this place, and it was impossible to affect the people of this land. Therefore, this kind of life was undoubtedly a kind of happiness. The black carriage that Grim and Laurian were in seemed to have the symbol of the Terran Association, so the carriages carrying goods and commercial goods would hide by the side of the road, waiting for them to pass by before daring to continue on their way. The pedestrians who saw the black carriage all bowed in respect and admiration. Looking at the giant bows and long swords on their backs, they seemed to be a group of adventurous mercenaries. In their group, there were always some sorcerer apprentices wearing short gray robes, holding sorcery books or short magic wands in their hands. They were in groups of 3 to 5, and their faces, bodies, and hands had traces of battle. The bags on their backs were bulging, and they seemed to have gained a lot. As for where they were going to the scattered small towns outside Cothran Castle. There were some small wizard towers and a large number of secret magic shops waiting for them to trade. Even though Grimm and Laurian had a lot of tricks up their sleeves that allowed them to cross thousands of miles in an instant and appear in front of the towering castle in the distance, they could only sit in the black chariot and travel at a normal pace when they arrived here. Asterisk chirp. Asterisk suddenly, a strange cry came from the sky. Grimm opened the curtain of the carriage and took a look. He saw 3 unusually majestic double-headed eagles flying quickly in the sky. On the backs of the eagles sat wizards in black and white robes. They seemed to be supervising wizards sent by the central castle to patrol the area, and they kept bending down to look at everything below them. When they saw the strange black carriage, they could not help but order the giant eagles to circle around in the sky. However, they took out a transparent crystal and communicated with a few people in the distance. Then, they turned their heads and flew in another direction. It's a law enforcement wizard from the Department of Inspection. They are responsible for monitoring all unusual movements around Fort Curslan. Hearing the strange cry of the eagle, Lorien could guess who it was even without poking his head out to look, so he explained briefly to Grimm. Grimm nodded without saying a word. When the giant eagle sorcerers flew over his head, he could see clearly that there was an image of an open eye on their chests. That should be the emblem of the Ministry of Supervision. As a different world, the environment here was undoubtedly well protected. Apart from a small number of human cities, villages, and inhabited areas, there were large tracts of cultivated farmland and vast forests that filled in between. However, compared to the dark forest, this vast forest had obviously been cleared. Apart from some small animals like wolves, foxes, sheep, and rabbits, it was rare to see any ferocious beasts, not to mention the terrifying, horrifying magical beasts. From this aspect, the rise of the sorcerer community had indeed brought great protection to the humans of the sorcerer world. The people who lived in such a peaceful environment were undoubtedly happy and satisfied. The magic colt pulling the black carriage seemed to be some kind of wizard beast. It was tame and quiet, and it moved very quickly. Carrying Grimm and Lorien, the carriage passed through the dark green forest, passing through a stone bridge over a flowing stream, passing through many manors and villas. Finally, it slowly approached a tall castle that stood on a small hill. The castle was surrounded by a high wall, and there was a clear and gentle moat that flowed like a mirror. When they passed through the gate on the outer wall, a group of black-armored guards only glanced at them and let them pass, allowing the black carriage to pass through the doorway. Inside was a large grayish-white plaza, surrounded by tall stone buildings. The main body of the castle faced the doorway. It was tall and majestic like a giant beast in deep sleep. Mercenaries and acolytes could not be seen here. The people entering and exiting the castle were all magi, wearing uniforms with all sorts of strange emblems on their chests. Most of them were rank 1 official magi, and there were quite a few rank 2 magi. However, rank 3 magi were rarely seen. Hence, when Lorien accompanied Grimm out of the black carriage, the magi of the association who saw them immediately rushed over to greet them. Standing at the entrance of the castle for a moment, Grimm's heart trembled as he looked at the 5-story, ancient building that was almost entirely made of stone. The entire castle was built with a strange, light, golden stone of an indistinguishable material. In Grimm's perception, the light golden boulder contained wisps of obscure magic power that were difficult to distinguish. They flowed through the interior of the boulder like a stream, using streaks of magical currents to form an unusually large and mysterious spell formation. Every inch of space here was filled with an indescribable and mysterious energy. It was different from any elemental energy, and it was not pure magical energy either. It was a strange energy that was completely independent of the existing mega system. Here, Grimm was completely suppressed by the strange energy, and his spiritual perception was limited to a radius of 3 meters around him. This caused Grimm, who usually relied heavily on his spiritual perception, to feel extremely uncomfortable. Fortunately, his eyes were not affected, and he had no problem seeing things normally. The moment he stepped into the castle's hall, Grimm felt as if he was in a different plane. Don't be surprised. This is the defensive mechanism of Cothran Castle. All magi from outside will be suppressed here. However, it'll be fine after a while, Lorien explained with a smile. However, after listening to Lorien's explanation, Grimm did not feel relieved. Instead, he became even more confused. With Grimm's powerful and mysterious elemental vision, he could not see any runes or lines of magical energy on the castle's surface. Yet, it was able to smoothly guide the magical energy between the walls and the large stones. Most importantly, Grimm could faintly sense an elemental rhythm unique to living beings in the mysterious energy that lingered around him. Alchemical life forms. You brought the entire Cothran Castle to life? Grimm exclaimed in a low voice. Hearing Grimm's words, Lorien's jaw dropped, and he asked in disbelief, How? How did you know? In truth, the fact that Cothran Castle had been brought to life as an alchemical life form 2,000 years ago was not known to the regular magi of the association. Only the higher-ups of the association knew a thing or two about it. For thousands of years, many high-ranked magi had entered Cothran Castle as guests. However, there had never been anyone like Grimm who could determine the state of Cothran Castle the moment he stepped in. Hence, Lorien could not help but be astonished. What Lorien didn't know was that Grimm was even more surprised and shocked than him at this moment. This was not an ordinary noble castle, but a gigantic stone castle that occupied an area of over 100 acres. To bring such a gigantic structure to life and give it sentience and thought like a human, this was completely out of Grimm's expectations. Originally, he had some doubts about the AI chip's scan and conclusion, but after seeing Lorien's expression, he completely believed it. What a grand plan, what a strange method. Those grade 4 magi really could not be underestimated. As if his identity had been exposed, the mysterious energy around Grimm began to vibrate and resonate. It spoke in a strange voice that only Grimm could hear. Welcome, human wizard. You are my 3,276th visitor since I was born, and the only magus who could see through my identity. I seem to smell the scent of my own kind on you. The voice was dull and noisy, with a strange smell of rocks rubbing against each other and vibrating the air. Disregarding external interference, I like you very much, human magus. In order to express my affection, I have decided to give you a first-class identity. This order has 27 opponents and 0 in favor of this order. Cothran's order has been rejected. Cothran has decided to give you a second-class identity. 119 opponents and 0 in favor of this order. However, the granting of a second-class identity is within Cothran's jurisdiction. Objections are invalid. This order will be carried out immediately. Following the series of words of this strange life form, the mysterious energy around Grimm began to boil like boiling water. Beep. Detected a connection with a foreign energy. It is an unattributed open energy channel. Detected no spiritual force attached. There are no hidden dangers. Host, please indicate whether to connect. Connect. As soon as the order was given, the spiritual force that had been compressed to a radius of 3 meters around him suddenly relaxed. His spiritual perception once again allowed him to have a panoramic view of everything within 100 meters of his body. Along with the strange energy came some fragmented and complicated information, which seemed to include some magic communication within the association. Has Cothran gone mad? Why would he give an outsider a second-class identity? I am urgently contacting Master Klinsman. He will give us an explanation. don't use the low secret channel anymore. That guy has a second-class identity. He might be able to monitor our conversation. Damn it, damn it, damn it. This time, that bastard authority is higher than mine. Chapter 10:28. The sudden appearance of the alchemical life form, Koslin, was not only out of everyone's expectations. Even Grimm himself was at a loss. Kindred? This Koslin could sense the existence of the AI chip. Hearing all sorts of flustered and exasperated roars, Grimm suddenly panicked. He could not help but break off the spiritual link with this strange life form. Detected unknown data source. Based on the current Level 2 authority, you can immediately access, browse, and download some open information, requesting host's instructions on whether to copy the data. While Grimm was in a state of panic, the AI chip's words caused him to quiver. Unknown data source? Open information? After Koslin gave him second-class authority, the so-called source of data couldn't be the internal storage of the scattered Pagoda 4 society, right? Download the data immediately and copy all the contents. Be quick. Grimm was very clear that this blunder could be big or small. Once the old fellows behind the association realized this, they would definitely block this loophole. Hence, being able to steal as much information as possible from their database before they could react would be a victory. Grimm could sense that after the order was given, his mind suddenly went blank. Large amounts of spiritual force silently flowed into the AI chip, turning into a mysterious force that supported it to operate at a crazy speed. At this moment, the AI chip had already connected with a mysterious data source in the distance. It began to use the Level 2 authority it had just obtained to copy and download all sorts of data and information. Although most of these were basic information that the Scattered Tower Forest Association made public to the Magi, the amount was abnormally large, and it covered all aspects of the megasystem. Moreover, there were only 6 levels of authority: Special Grade, Level 1, Level 2, Level 3, Level 4, and Level 5. Among them, only President Fred had the Special Grade authority. Level 1 was shared by all the Rank 4 Magi in the association. Level 2 belonged to the Rank 3 Magi in the association. Level 3 belonged to Rank 2 Magi. Level 4 belonged to Rank 1 Magi. And Level 5 belonged to Acolytes. With this level of authority, an outsider like Grimm, who had just stepped into the Tower Forest Association, had the same authority as Laurian. He could also access the internal database of the association. Such a thing was extremely rare. Hence, accompanied by Lauren, Grimm explored the layout of the castle while struggling to keep up with the rapid demand for spiritual energy from the AI chip in his mind. Finally, on the 85th second after Grimm obtained the second-class access, an old and cold voice suddenly appeared in his mind. "That's enough, kid. Humph, it's only been a while, and I've already caused such a big mess." The spiritual link between the AI chip and the source of the mysterious data in the distance was suddenly cut off, and the powerful spiritual rebound caused Grimm to feel dizzy. Grimm, who was walking with Lauren in an empty tunnel, suddenly leaned against the wall and put his hand on his numbskull. He felt dizzy for a while. After a full quarter of an hour, Grimm finally woke up from the mental shock, and what greeted him was Lauren's sinister smile. "That voice just now," Grimm stammered. "That's President Frid." Lauren laughed sinisterly. "Did you use your authority to peek at the information of the association? It's the accumulation of the association's hard work over thousands of years. The president would never allow an outsider like you to casually browse through it, so it's only natural that you suffer a little." It was no wonder that Lauren was laughing so easily. After all, it had only been a few seconds since Grimm obtained the second-class access and was kicked out by the president. What could he do with such a small amount of time? He probably hadn't even browsed through the directory of the association's many secret information. President Frid had the same thought as well. If they knew that Grimm had such a powerful AI chip in his mind that was good at computing and storing data that would not have been so relaxed. Grim secretly communicated with the AI chip while stroking his head. The AI chip had connected to the spiritual world of the alchemy life form, Koslin. The association had spent so much effort to turn the entire castle into an independent body of consciousness, so they naturally wanted to strengthen it into a mysterious trump card. If the castle was seen as the wizard's pagoda, then Koslin would undoubtedly be the pagoda spirit. All the internal information and witchcraft communications of the association were transferred through the consciousness of Koslin, a huge alchemy life. Hence, when the AI chip used its second-class access to enter the vast and boundless space of consciousness, it began to frantically copy and download data and information within the limits of its authority. According to the AI chip's calculations, in these few seconds, it had only copied and downloaded 3% of the information. It was only 5%. Although it sounded like a small amount, it was a compilation of the vast amount of knowledge and internal information of the scattered Tower Forest Association over thousands of years. 3%. 5% was already an insane number. Just as Grim was pretending to be in pain, Lauren suddenly raised his head and looked in a certain direction, as if listening to something. Then, he turned around and smiled at Grim. "Come with me. Lord Frid wants to meet you." Grim's heart trembled, and the pained expression on his face disappeared in an instant, replaced by a solemn expression. A grade 4 magus. That was a grade 4 magus. Now, this grade 4 magus wanted to meet him. Although he had dealt with grade 4 magi a few times, whenever he thought back to the terrifying feeling of his mind being suppressed, he would feel a little scared. As if sensing Grim's nervousness, Wizard Lauren comforted him. "Don't worry. The president will not make things too difficult for you. After all, this is all Koslin's fault. The president will not take his anger out on you." Grim smiled without saying a word, and then followed Lauren's lead to somewhere in the castle's upper level. Grim's mind had been disturbed by the so-called authority issue, so he did not pay much attention to the layout and architectural style of the castle. Now that he calmed down and took a closer look, he suddenly felt a strange sense of familiarity. This familiar tunnel, this familiar wall, this familiar stone door. What does this place have to do with the Wind of Freedom? Grim suddenly asked. Lauren led the way in front, chuckling without turning his head. "You finally found out. The Wind of Freedom is actually a spiritual illusion created by Koslin, and most of the buildings in there are projections of Koslin Castle's consciousness. If you often go in and out of the Wind of Freedom, you will naturally feel an inexplicable sense of familiarity. So that's how it is." Grim silently nodded. In a secret room in the castle's upper level, Grim met the legendary president of the association. The president was an old magus with white eyebrows and a beard. He wore a white robe and a pointy wizard hat on his head. His fingers were covered with all kinds of magic rings, and he could feel a strong and dense magical aura from all the parts of his body that could be adorned with magic accessories. Grim could not help but be speechless. His elemental vision could clearly see that the president had a total of 27 sources of strong magical aura, and all of them were grade 3 and above magic items. With so many magic tools, even if the president used every single one of them, it would be enough to kill most of his opponents. Not to mention the president's personal strength. Just the price of these magic tools alone was not something an ordinary grade 4 magus could afford. A tycoon. This was definitely the biggest tycoon Grim had ever seen. Compared to the president, Grim, who had been complacent about his equipment, felt a little ashamed. "You're Grim?" President Fred narrowed his eyes and carefully sized up Grim. After a long time, he finally nodded and said, "Not bad, not bad. You are indeed as outstanding as they described. If I'm not wrong, your mental strength has reached 39 points, right?" Grim knew that he could not hide his mental strength from the president, so he nodded and admitted it. Lauren, who had accompanied him here, raised his head in surprise and looked at Grim with a hint of shock in his eyes. The last time he met this fire shaman in Rain City, he was only a grade 2 magus. In the short span of a few decades, the other party had actually caught up to him and surpassed him. This was too inconceivable. 39 points of mental strength. Lauren had been a grade 3 magus for 400 to 500 years, but he had only managed to raise his mental strength to 37 points. It sounded like he was only 1 or 2 steps away from the peak of grade 3, but Lauren was well aware that the closer one's mental strength was to the peak, the slower one's meditation progress would be. This was also the reason why most rank 3 sorcerers, after sensing that there was no more room for improvement in their meditation technique, would start adventuring all over the place in hopes of improving their spiritual force through danger and the stimulation of life and death. They would also search for rare treasures or spells that could assist in improving their spiritual force. After all, to be unable to feel any progress after meditating for more than 10 years, this kind of huge mental torture was not something that an ordinary person could easily endure. However, this legendary fire shaman had crossed the threshold of grade 2 and 3 in less than 100 years. Was this because he had amazing talent, or did he have some special treasure on him? Lauren's mind was in a mess, and his thoughts ran wild. He could no longer hear the rest of the conversation. "My lord, I heard that you wanted to see me. Is there anything you need me to do?" Grimm hesitated for a moment, but in the end, he chose to speak frankly. Both sides were at different levels of strength, and their perspectives were different as well. Hence, Grimm did not dare to play any tricks in front of this revered and powerful grade 4 magus. Chapter 1029. Sapphira. Grimm muttered this name in his heart. Though he did not say anything, his eyes betrayed his thoughts. Of course he knew about Sapphira. It was an extremely rare item, a top-notch resource exclusive to rank 4 magi. To be more specific, Sapphira was a special resource formed from the combination of a plane's laws and a certain substance. In an ordinary world, the plane's origin was hidden behind the world's structure and laws. It was a part of the world's laws that flowed at all times and could not be captured. Only when a plane suffered great damage and could no longer maintain its integrity and stability would the world's membrane break, allowing a void storm to invade the plane. Only then would a portion of the plane's origin be released due to the destruction of the law system. One of the main reasons why the astral beasts liked to invade planes was because they wanted to devour the sweet and delicious plane's origin. Astral beasts could tear apart the plane's barriers and break the balance of the plane, allowing them to devour the stray plane's origin. This was a necessary process for the astral beasts to grow stronger. Hence, it was not without reason that the astral beasts were known as the enemies of planes and all living beings. In the past, there were very few ancient magi who could transcend the plane's laws. One of the main reasons was that the laws of planes were illusory and unfathomable. One could only rely on shocking talent and luck, spending a lot of time to slowly comprehend them. This process was the hardest to grasp. Even if one had shocking talent and outstanding battle prowess, once one was stuck at comprehending the plane's laws, the most likely outcome would be to spend hundreds of years without any progress. In the end, one's lifespan would be exhausted and they would die with regrets. In the past hundreds of thousands of years in the Magus world, countless geniuses and geniuses had been stuck at the peak of rank 4, unable to grasp the power of laws and becoming short-lived meteors. Many magi were talented and intelligent. In order to solve this huge problem, they had racked their brains and used all sorts of methods. Finally, in some damaged planes, magi who were brave enough to explore discovered this strange resource, Sapphira, and analyzed the mechanism by which it was formed. From then on, powerful magi began to consciously destroy some planes to induce the birth of Sapphira. The appearance of large amounts of Sapphira made it 100 times easier for magi to comprehend the plane's laws compared to ancient magi. This ultimately led to the number of grand wizards being more than 10 times that of the ancient times. Even so, destroying an entire realm and indirectly killing tens of billions of life forms was all for the sake of some origin substance. The more evil they did, the more the sorcerers were hated by the other races. In the records of many planes, magi, the demons of the abyss world, and the lords of calamity of the calamity world were all classified as evil. This was also directly related to the fact that magi would carry out large-scale blood sacrifices or concoction of origin substances wherever they went. However, in recent years, with the continuous emergence of great sorcerers, in order to improve the sorcerer faction's image to the outside world, they had no choice but to ban the deliberate destruction of planes and worlds to gather origin substance. As a result, the supply of origin substance in the past few thousand years had greatly decreased. In the Magus world, no matter what type of origin substance it was classified as a grade 4 item, and its price was so high that it made one speechless. Due to the rarity of origin substance, it had become a top-notch resource that even grade 4 magi fought over. Ordinary grade 3 magi had no way of obtaining it. Therefore, when Wizard Freed suddenly mentioned origin substance, Grimm's heart couldn't help but race. He had a strange feeling. It seems like you already know about origin substance, so I won't go into detail about its uses. A crafty smile appeared on Wizard Freed's face. So, Mr. Grimm, I wonder if you'd like to obtain some origin substance. Mr. Freed, if there's anything you want to say, just say it. As long as it's within my capabilities, I won't refuse. Good. Hearing Grimm's reply, Wizard Freed's face immediately broke into a smile. In the past few hundred years, there hasn't been a new grade 4 Magus in our scattered tower forest. Therefore, the association is planning to gather a few of the most popular grade 3 magi in the central continent to have a fair competition and choose a winner. Speaking up to this point, Wizard Freed paused for a moment, then squinted his eyes and continued. The reward for the winner is to join the association, enjoy the benefits of a grade 4 Magus, and receive 500 Sith origin substance. Grimm's heart suddenly stopped beating and took a long time for it to start beating again. Sith was a unit of measurement for origin substance. Due to the special nature of origin substance, it had no weight, no volume, and could be attached to any material. Therefore, it could only be absorbed by non-elemental crystals. This was the only way to ensure that the law of origin substance would not be contaminated by the substance of the plane. In auctions and private transactions between high-grade magi, origin substance was always in high demand. However, those that could be taken out for auction were mostly low-grade origin substance that had been contaminated by the substance of the plane. The law of origin substance inside had already been corroded by the ubiquitous magic elements. True high-grade origin substance had always existed in the private collections of high-grade magi. They were kept a secret and would never appear in public. The origin substance that Wizard Freed was talking about was definitely the high-grade origin substance. According to Grimm's understanding, 500 Sith origin substance was actually not a lot. According to the statistics of the Magus world, if a grade 4 Magus wanted to comprehend and control the laws of the world with the origin substance, the amount of origin substance consumed would depend on the individual's innate talent. For those with great innate talent, 7,000 Sith origin substance would be enough. For those with poor innate talent, they would need 20,000 to 50,000 Sith origin substance. If a Magus forcefully destroyed a small plane, the total amount of origin substance they could obtain would only be 100,000 Sith origin substance. Therefore, to nurture a great Magus that could surpass grade 4, the amount of resources needed was simply astonishing. It was not something that a normal Magus family could afford. 500 Sith origin substance might not be enough for a grade 4 Magus to reach grade 5, but for a grade 3 Magus who had already reached the peak, it would be enough for them to smoothly cross the threshold and become a powerful grade 4 Magus. With Grimm's confidence in himself, even without the origin substance, he was confident that he could smoothly reach grade 4 in 1 or 200 years. However, with this origin substance, The time he needed to advance would be shortened to an inconceivable degree. Hence, the temptation of 500 Sith origin substance was incomparably great. Competition. Origin substance. Grimm listened attentively, silently savoring the information. He still had some doubts about the association's motives. The grade 4 magi of the association definitely had some origin substance in their hands. These were the guarantees that they could use to advance. If they used all of them, they would feel that it was not enough. Who would be so kind as to take out the origin substance they had painstakingly gathered and give it to their juniors? This was not in line with the selfish nature of magi. Hence, there was definitely some hidden conspiracy behind the association's participation in the Grade 3 Magus competition. It was just that with Grimm's current status and identity, he did not have the means to find out more. Who were the participants this time? Grimm asked in a low voice. Originally, there were only 3 veteran Grade 3 Magi. Garo from the Randner family, Dante from the Enemder Academy, and Sanazar from the Salubo family. In view of your outstanding performance in the previous Magus family war, many elders in the association suggested that you be added to the list of participants. How about it? Little fellow, are you willing to participate in this competition? At this moment, even with the AI chip's high-speed calculations, it could not calculate all the pros and cons. Everything depended on Grimm's personal analysis and judgment. There was definitely a crisis. However, the existence of a crisis could only indicate danger and opportunity. For those who were prepared, a crisis was an opportunity. It was a good time to break the rules and surpass the enemy. However, for those who were unprepared, a crisis was a real danger. It would push them into a difficult situation where they could not advance or retreat. The reason why he was here was undoubtedly because of Alice's attitude. From Alice's subtle hints before they set off, Grimm vaguely understood something. Grimm raised his head and met Sir Fred's gaze, nodding heavily. Sir Fred, I am willing to participate in this competition. Good, very good. Wizard Fred nodded in satisfaction. He turned around and ordered, Lauren, you have heard Grimm's reply. Go and make the arrangements. Yes, sir. Lauren glanced at Grimm with a complicated expression, then turned around and left. All right, during this period of time, you can rest and adjust yourself in Curseland Castle. The association will announce the competition to all the Magus families and organizations scattered across the Tower Forest. They will be invited to send representatives to participate in this competition. It is estimated that the competition will start in 3 months. This way, even the Magus families in the most remote areas will have a chance to rush over. President Fred answered a lot of questions before waving his hand and sending Grimm away. After Grimm's figure disappeared from the room, President Fred stroked his beard and smiled, muttering to himself in silence. Light and shadow flashed in the room, and a male and a female sorcerer appeared. How is it? You have also observed Grimm. What do you think of him? Fred did not seem to be surprised by their appearance and asked directly. His body's data is a little strange. It seems to be a little too high. The new Magus had a thin figure, but his face was hale and hearty. He was also an old Magus, the vice president of the association, Magus Merva. As for the female Magus, she was the rank 4 Magus Clara, the current head of the Randner family. The Magus who was participating in the competition, Facebreaker Garo, was a member of her family. Apart from his body's data, there are also some problems with his soul waves. There seems to be something strange mixed in it. Magus Clara said coldly. President Fred and Vice President Merva pondered for a moment and could not help but nod their heads in agreement. That's right, there is something strange in this brat's soul waves that is completely different from humans. It is very hard to fathom. No matter how strange a soul is, as long as it does not affect the competition, it will be fine. Don't forget, there's less than 30 years left. If we don't find a scapegoat by then, we'll be the unlucky ones. Wizard Freed clenched his teeth and squeezed out these cold words from between his teeth. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.